Alright guys, let's go ahead and get started for today. How are you doing? Doing our usual stream. Getting in here. Getting it done. Moving a few things around. Still doing a little bit of setup. But how are things going with you? Hopefully well. We'll give people a few minutes. I need to post up that I'm actually, doing the stream. Do that. Make sure people are aware. So we played some D&D yesterday, and did we play D&D? We played D&D last Sunday, but not tomorrow. Importantly, not tomorrow. But that should be changing in the upcoming. We're actually gonna have a few weeks off on our usual Sunday game. Yeah, it's holiday times, at least the time of streaming. Sorry, man. We're gonna see how it got this morning, and up with a very not necessarily sore, but a scratchy throat. How it goes. Oh yeah, so we're not gonna play our usual Sunday game. It's holiday time, at least at the time of recording, so that's not surprising. That's the sort of thing that just happens when it gets around holiday time, especially with a hobby like D&D where you need to get multiple, oftentimes adults, to schedule together. Not going to come up that often around the holidays. Everybody's doing their own thing. Yeah, let me get this put up. Alright. Alright, so we got a few things that we're gonna talk about today. But we got a few things we're gonna talk about today. No, it's not. Okay. Sorry, getting turned around, getting distracted. So we got a few things we're going to talk about today. I figured today we'd give ourselves a little break from our OSR Lite. We still got a little bit more we need to talk about, sort of the role play or social pillar of playing the game, and what we can kind of steal little tidbits from OSR from the olden days and kind of sprinkle back into our modern game. We'll probably do that coming up probably next week, honestly. Should be streaming. I don't think there's any reason why it wouldn't be, but we'll see. It is the holidays, so we'll see how I feel. Who knows? But that's the plan, at least for right now. Until then, today we're going to talk about a few different things. I thought we'd start off with some just D&D news. I know I don't usually do news, especially for like D&D, because there's a billion YouTube channels that do that you can go watch, who are heavily dependent on, hungry on that news cycle as to how they get views. That's not really my thing, but I figured it's kind of the end of the year. It's a transition year. It's a very interesting kind of year for D&D, so talk a little bit about it. Not very long, and then we'll kind of move on to some other stuff. We're going to talk about some vocabulary for dungeon masters. Those getting a nice sort of reading vocabulary to sprinkle in your descriptions that can kind of elevate things just a little bit. So it's not always, you're like, you can go, well, you pick it up and it's an ochre blade, instead of being like, it's a rusty blade, orangey blade. Just having a few more vocabulary words to kind of sprinkle in there that just kind of spice up the fantasy-esque part of the description. So we'll talk a little bit about that, and then I'm going to talk a little bit about a thing that I've been working on for a little bit, and really just kind of started implementing. And took a look at it. I used it for the battle map that I created for last night's game, where they fought a carrion crawler, and it worked out really well. And I figured, well, I guess at that point it's worth sharing. We're going to talk a little bit about some dice drop battle maps, how to make a battle map really quickly just by having you and your players just drop some dice and kind of throw things down, so that way you're not always playing that featureless gray white box where there's no terrain, there's no conditions, there's nothing to really worry about. It's just really boring combat where monsters and PCs run at each other, a la Marvel movie, and then just smash and then stay there until one side is dead. So trying to avoid that by creating some more interesting battlefields. And it's just nice to look at. So we'll talk a little bit about that. I guess that's enough preamble. I guess. If there's... Whether anybody else makes it in, then yeah, another minute or so. Then we'll get started. Kind of going on. Been working on like a hex crawl document. I know there are people who said that they were. A lot of people have been interested in it. I was like, well, maybe it's time for me to put something about that up online. Usually it's just my notes, so I figured, maybe take something that's a little bit something I use primarily for myself and share it with you guys in a more lasting format so you can pick it up and use it if you want. I'll probably put it up on DriveThruRPG. It's probably gonna take me a while, honestly, so don't get too excited. It's not coming out tomorrow by any means. So we'll see how it gets in there. I was inspired to do it after I saw a review for a different hex crawl document that I looked at and went, there's just not a lot in that thing. I'm not sure if it's worth the like monetary price of it. Like there just wasn't a lot to it. It's very limited, very sort of like OSR old school kind of hinge to it, which is fine. Now, I enjoy it, but it didn't feel like it was something that I could pick up and maybe like move into like a D&D 5e campaign if I really wanted to, or a 2024 campaign if I wanted to. It was a little limited, and I was like, well, I can put something together that's maybe a little bit more robust, or at least a little bit more focused on a new dungeon master who's maybe interested in doing hex crawls rather than somebody who's familiar with them in the sort of OSR tradition. So do that. But that's down the pipeline, so like I said, don't expect it to come out tomorrow or anything. But I guess that's enough, so let's jump into mostly talking head video, so fully second screen content if you're concerned about that. For the most part, maybe once we get down to the Battlemaps stuff, there'll be some stuff to show off, but here in the beginning we're just going to be kind of talking about stuff. So I thought we'd kick off the stream by talking about D&D news, or rather kind of like the lack of D&D news here at the end of 2025 is the year currently as streaming. So a little bit. What was I saying? Oh, so the primary thing that I looked at is that there's not a ton of news in general at the end. They did a nice D&D Beyond AMA, which was interesting, over on Reddit, looking at some of the stuff that kind of went on with that. But other than naming a new lead, there's not a ton of D&D news. But really what I wanted to focus in was a little kind of gaping hole in D&D news, which is that there's nothing really on the D&D 2026 publishing schedule officially. There's not a lot from WoTC that's kind of going on. There is coming up, to my knowledge, it could change. Now I know there's some changes, and we'll talk about that in just a second, about why maybe there's not stuff on the schedule. But for 2026, to my knowledge, we have basically a new publishing of the Dragonlance trilogy, which is great, I guess. It's a 40-year-old book trilogy. So I'm like, you either already have, if you're a big fan of it, you probably already have a nice collector's edition of it. If you're a new person who hasn't read the trilogy, you could probably pick up the paperbacks really, really cheaply. So it makes me think of, like, I don't know exactly who this is for. It's really kind of what's really been a WoTC D&D kind of thing, really focusing on like collector's edition stuff, collector focused stuff. So we have alternate covers for all the core books and stuff like that to try to get, because there are people out there that will just pay for the kind of collector's edition in it that's not any different than anything else. And I get it. Some, at least with the books, like some of the artwork has been, well, obviously much better than the standard book. Like I have the standard Xanathar's guide, and honestly, that's the one book that I think I prefer the actual cover over the artist cover. I just don't like the artist cover of that one. Most of the other ones I really enjoy. I think they're mostly better, obviously, but that one is in particular. I'm like, that's the one that I'm glad that I have the standard edition, because I just like the standard edition art much better. Was Xanathar and the goldfish name I don't remember. But as far as like things that are coming out, is like you have a re-release of a very old book at this point, 40 years, and we have that's upcoming for 2026. And the only other thing that we have on the docket right now is a crochet book, so a craft book, which falls very much in line. I realized last time I was in, I think it was a Michael's, I saw a D&D book in there, and I was like, that's interesting. I hadn't really considered that. The overlap. I mean, it makes sense. Like, that's why I was in, like, the Michael's, like, the hobby and craft store, the arts and crafts store in general. That's why I was in there, but still felt weird. It was like, oh, yeah, there is... I guess if that's where they think the money is, with all those offset things, like the cookbooks and the drink guides and the crochet books, like all this extra stuff, and not you look at the 2026 calendar and you go upcoming and you're like, well, there's not really anything D&D related. Like, it's all D&D, like big umbrella brand related, but nothing kind of focused on the actual game itself, which was very interesting. And I was like, that's something that hasn't happened in a little bit. Generally, we always have something. Like, no adventures that we know are coming out, no new source books. I mean, Eberron Artificer stuff just came out. But nothing kind of down the gap for the next year. I'm like, maybe that has something to do with the publishing delay. You know that WoTC and Hasbro had some publishing stuff that issues, things that got pushed back towards the end of this year, 2025. So I understand that, you know, that might be a continuation, so they don't feel confident about putting any sort of dates out there, but it feels like weird that if you're not like, oh, this book is definitely going to happen in the next 365 days. You can't nail down at least that's coming in that year. In the same way that like a video game releases is like, if you can't tell me the year that it's going to come out, it can't be close to being out at all, or there's nothing coming. So that kind of that's the thing that pulled my attention, why I wanted to kind of talk about it a little bit. It's like, so, but we do have this physical delay aspect of it. But there is also other stuff that's going on at D&D, right? We know that they've hemorrhaged a lot of senior staff this past year. Lots of people who have moved in 2024. They laid off a whole bunch of people. So it does feel like we've hit the peak probably of this D&D 5e 2024, and we're on the downslope of it. And D&D, I would say popularity overall, I think that it is very much moving out of the limelight and back into kind of the niche area that it used to be. And it'd be like, oh, this is a niche interest for very specific people who are interested in this, and not as, you know, popular as it is. I think our D&D bubble in general has burst in that way. I think we are on the downside, on the downslope of the back end of it. And I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. I think obviously it's a bad thing as far as we're going to see probably lesser and lesser stuff come out. And it does put interest into, like, what is D&D going to look like? Because if it becomes unprofitable, then Hasbro's obviously going to kick that out the door and try to sell that IP off to somebody else. They're going to sell that brand off to somebody else. They won't want it. Which will be difficult for Hasbro, because it's probably one of the most popular and most profitable things that they have going on for them, which is pretty much all Wizards of the Coast. Everything else over at Hasbro doesn't seem to be doing super great most of the time. It'll be interesting if they try to let go of it. Remember that I guess a couple years ago at this point, there was an interest in shareholders trying to spin off potentially D&D and WoTC out of Hasbro, because it's the more profitable aspect of the company. They're like, well, we should just spin it off and it should be its own company and not have to deal with all the toy sales and things like that on the other Hasbro side that, and board games and stuff that aren't doing very well. So I think that there is a lot of stuff that's kind of going on behind those closed doors that we don't really know about. But it is always really surprising when it's like, oh, there's going to be a year of basically no releases that are being announced. Very interesting. But we are seeing a lot of that ancillary stuff. Like we saw the Crochet book, saw that the D&D novels that they're going to get re-released for Dragonlance, and the new Warlock game. We got a trailer for that at Game Awards, right? It came out, so the new D&D licensed Warlock video game will be coming out in the future. So when I see like these releases and the staff shuffle up, this feels very in line with past WoTC and Hasbro actions. I think this is a continued positioning of D&D being more profitable as a brand than it is as a product or game. Where D&D has that, they want D&D to be a Pokemon kind of brand. Pokemon, the video games actually don't make that much money for Nintendo in general. It's all the stuff around Pokemon that makes it the biggest brand in the world. It's not the video games itself. It's all the plushies and stickers and branding deals with everything under the sun that makes all that, that makes them all that profit. And most of that stuff they don't have to spend anything for, right? They just license the brand out, license the characters out. I think that's where D&D wants to, where Hasbro and WoTC want to get D&D. That's what I'm saying. I think that for them it's a lot more profitable as a brand to have video games and novels and coloring books and, you know, the licensed knickknacks, Funko style stuff. Like even I have like a Funko Pop style, what is that guy? A Roper. Because Roper's one of my favorites. Those sort of knickknacks and other things in licensing, and their quality assurance for that is not great. I've seen a number of their things have been like, this is not super high quality stuff. But I think that is the direction that Hasbro and WoTC want to move D&D in general, and focus a little bit less on the nuts and bolts of trying to sell books and rules to people. I don't think they're as interested in that anymore. So I think just in general for me that the news about D&D and what they're doing has kind of fallen off the cliff a little bit. Like I said, I think we're on the back end of this. There are many content creators who have sort of got popular as that ship-lifting tide of D&D when 5e kind of blew up in the pandemic and everybody was just looking for things to do to connect with people. We saw that tide that raises all ships in D&D, and a lot of content creators and other people and small publishers and things like that, freelancers, kind of rose with that tide. But now I think that D&D tide is going away, and I think we're seeing a lot of the content creators, a lot of the people who were supporting 5e in 2024, we're seeing a lot of them move their focus to different product offerings, primarily their own. And whether that's systems or source books or settings or whatever, people are a lot more focused on creating for their little piece of the pie for themselves than necessarily supporting D&D at this point in a very matter-of-fact way. We even, so many content creators have seen focusing more on different games too, kind of highlighting other games that are not D&D, focusing on those a little bit more, which is not, I don't see it as either a good or a bad thing. I think it's perfectly great. I think that focusing on the other things, making lots of people who are not aware of a lot of other games, so doing that work, making sure that people are aware of all the other different types of TTRPGs that you can play and have a lot of fun with, especially depending on the type of style of game that you want to play. There are just a lot of rule sets that are really better at doing very specific things or specific modes of play than D&D is, where D&D is very much sort of like the kitchen sink aspect of it, where people are trying to reinvent D&D to be something that it's not, and putting a lot of work in there. So I'm seeing a lot of sort of focus off, and then so that's kind of a marker for me as well. I'm also seeing that I looked at our premium vendor, Yule Grim. They're putting out a anniversary box set for Tyranny of Dragons. I'm like, okay, so they're doing a 2024 rules update of a 10-year-old adventure. An adventure that is in contention with most people for being the worst D&D adventure path of the past 10 years. Tyranny of Dragons. Next to Princes, right? Prince is the other one that people don't like. So this one is in contention, and having played some of it is like, I understand it's not a super great module. I didn't play it all the way through, but I played quite a bit of it. I went, it's just not very good. Luckily, I wasn't running it. So when you have your premium vendor who's going back and making like a $300, $400 thing off of a bad adventure that everybody knows is bad, that tells me that they're starved for new content to adapt. So that means that maybe there's not new content coming down the pipeline. I think that there's this lack of release schedule and the naming of a new D&D game design director. That's Justice Armon. You haven't checked him out. I think it's heavy evidence that there's probably 6th edition is probably in development at this point. If it isn't already, if it's ramping up, if it hasn't kicked off already, or it's ramping up. I assume it's ramping up, but at least, if nothing else, it's probably being kicked off now. If it's not already going, I assume it's already going, just based off of the history of D&D and kind of how they work. They put out an edition, then they do a half edition rules update, and pretty much at the moment they put out that rules update, they are immediately working on the next edition of D&D. What they did in 3rd edition, it's what they did in 4th edition. I don't think it's probably going to be any different for what they're doing in 5th edition. That's what they know works. They're going to do it. They feel like they can replicate those results. So I fully expect that they are working on 6th edition as soon as the 2024 rules update came out. But personally, I don't have any D&D stuff on my purchase list for the upcoming year. I'm like, I mean, other than the books that are coming out of them, I don't buy that many books. The books that I do have that are kind of back up there are mostly the anthologies. I'm like, oh, I just want a bunch of smaller adventures that I can use for different things, rather than one of those like 1st to 15th level big adventure books. I'm not really interested in playing in those or running those, so I just have the anthology stuff. So there's nothing really coming out for me in this next year that I know of, at least D&D specific in general. Certainly nothing that's coming out of WoTC, because I don't want to buy the Dragonlance books or the Crochet book. But even third-party support, I don't really have anything on my radar that's like, oh, I definitely want to pick this up. In fact, my radar is pretty much on some OSR stuff, on some different systems. In general, kind of mixing and looking at a bunch of different stuff. And most of my attention in that realm is kind of taken by other game systems that I'm interested to see that are like coming out or have been out for a little bit. I want to learn more about them and less about D&D. Just because right now, D&D doesn't have anything that interests me. It doesn't give me any spark to light my fire for it. I just don't. Am I running it? Yeah. Am I playing it? Yeah. But, you know, the thing that's keeping it interesting is the people that I'm playing with and what we are doing, and not anything that's kind of coming down the chute from D&D proper. That'll continue to be what's going on. And we'll probably keep playing other systems too, while we work on that stuff, while we try to figure out what we want to do. I think we're getting to a point where everybody, at least in the groups I'm playing with, they're starting to get a little tired of D&D in general. Played a lot of it. Very familiar with the system at that point, to the point where it feels like it's harder and harder to feel like something new is coming out without the DM putting in a lot of effort to make something new happen. So I think it's just getting a little stale. Not in a bad way. It's just when you keep eating the same thing, at some point you get tired of eating that thing. Even pizza, right? If I eat pizza every day, I love pizza, but at some point I'm going to be tired of eating pizza and I want to eat something else. That's kind of the position I am with D&D right now. Like, it's great. I'd like to play something else. And once I play something else, I'll come back to it and be like, hey, did you guys know that pizza's great? Same sort of situation. So about Armand stepping into the role as he's, what is he, director of the designer? I'm gonna make sure that I get his title right. Game designer director. The director of game design, essentially. So I don't think that things are probably gonna do great for them. I'm interested to see how Armand does at the wheel. He seems like a great choice given some of his previous works. I don't really credit a ton of the work that he did at Beetle and Grimm as a good example of what he does, since that's adapting things that were already made. Because that was one of the things that's where he's been working the last 2 to 3 years. But those guys aren't putting out anything original. They're taking official WoTC adaptations of D&D modules. So I'll necessarily look at that and be like, oh, well, they know what they're doing in that aspect. But I think if you look at some of the other stuff they've done, that it makes a lot more sense. He pretty much well known for his DM Guild work on the Candlekeep stuff that he put out, and the very, very popular fan-made alternate introduction to Avernus is probably what he's most well known for. I don't have personal experience with either one of these. I believe that my friend the DM, we talked about in the current campaign we're doing it. We were either going to do the one we're doing right now, or do the Avernus campaign. And by doing those campaigns, I mean basically start off on those paths and then completely screw it up and end up doing our own thing, because that's generally how that goes. We stay on the modules path for about, I don't know, maybe 5 sessions, and then after that we're off to the races doing our own things. But I know that he said that if we were going to run Avernus, instead of doing the really not good Baldur's Gate introduction, he was going to swap it out for an alternative one. And I assume it was probably this Justice Armand one. I don't know off the top of my head, though. But I assume that was the one that he was talking about. And I'm hesitant to blame Armand, because I don't think things are probably going to go well. I don't think that he's going to right that ship in a day. And it's not how that works. But I'm hesitant to blame Armand for that, because I think he's stepping into a D&D design team that's been gutted and doesn't really seem to have a lot of original flavor kind of going on right now, whereas most of the work that they put out recently, it feels very... It's not like it's trite, it's just that it's very practical. It's a very practical application of stuff, and it doesn't seem to show a lot of huge spark, a big interest. It doesn't have a lot of creative flair to it. I guess a design team that doesn't seem to have a ton of creativity on it. Which, that's hard. Be like, how do I change the things if I don't have the right mix of people to do that? Because I don't think you can blame a great mechanic for not fixing your car when they have a bunch of bad parts that they're working with. They don't have the parts to fix the car. You can't fix the car. You can't repair it. So I think that's part of the issue. So I don't expect him to do super great, specifically in this first year of which he's heading everything. Second is because the problem that we've already ID'd very much is that there is pressure from WoTC and Hasbro executives and shareholders as to how things are getting done for D&D. As soon as D&D started making a lot of money for Hasbro executives obviously have a lot of vested interest, and the shareholders have a lot of vested interest on what gets done with D&D then. Whereas it used to be D&D was very much a thing that flew under the radar. That's sort of how 5th edition happened. That was very much flying under the radar, and nobody was really expecting big things. Even when WoTC was purchased D&D originally, they're like, well, we wanted to preserve it because we love the game, and TSR was going under. It wasn't because they ever thought that D&D was going to make them a ton of money. That's okay. They have Magic the Gathering that does that for them. They don't necessarily need that. But now D&D's become a very, very profitable thing. And so now a lot of people who don't know anything about games or game design or the hobby or anything like that have their fingers in the pie, and they get their fingers. They got too many cooks in the kitchen, mashing stuff around because you have a bunch of people who don't know anything about that. They're just looking at bottom line money. How do I make money go up? And they're focusing a lot more on that. And we see that with the gutting of the design team and things like that. Was the design team maybe overloaded? Maybe. I don't know. I couldn't tell you. I know that when you let go that many people like they did at the end of 2024, there's some misalignment somewhere as to why you have that too many employees that aren't critical enough that you can kind of let go. Specifically from D&D. So I don't know what that is. I do think that they're focusing a lot more on Sigil and focusing a lot more on the map stuff. As D&D's kind of always been, as that kind of became a part of D&D in general, what's the D&D Beyonds and the digital and online tools became part of D&D. There's always been a heavy emphasis on that, and we have a lot of history that shows that WoTC and Hasbro are just not very good at doing those things. They've never been very good at them, and I don't suspect that will change. But it is where they put a lot of focus and they put a lot of money. Sometimes it does feel like good dollars after bad, but we'll see how that goes. So, all I'll say as far as D&D news is concerned is that I'm very interested. I think the next year is going to be really interesting for D&D. We're going to see a lot of different stuff that's going to show up. A lot of things are going to change because we have a release schedule that doesn't really have anything in it for the game. We've got new people coming in and new people leadership that are changing. We had a lot of veteran people leaving this last year, and the year before we laid off a bunch of people. So I think there's a mix-up. Like I said, I think that we're probably going to get... It would be my thought that we're going to get the 6th edition announcement probably sometime during 2026. I don't know when. Not to come out 2026, for sure. They'll probably come out, because 2024 just came out, so it might come out next year, maybe. Maybe. I'm trying to think of historically what they've done. Because Essentials was not around very often. I guess I can just look it up. Because the D&D Next playtest for D&D started in 2012, the open playtest, so they were already working on it. When did D&D Essentials came out? Because didn't it come out in like 2010? No. It's showing me the Essentials kit. That's not what I want. I don't want the Essentials kit. Essentials was a major relaunch of D&D 4th edition starting in late 2010. Yeah. So 2008 is when D&D 4th edition came out, and then a buttload of stuff came out for it in those 2 years. And then at the end of 2010, after Pathfinder had very much sort of taken that core audience, which is old D&D history, old WoTC history, when they announced 4th edition, they were just like, hey, we're announcing 4th edition, and the book's coming out, and oh, by the way, we're also just not going to support 3rd edition at all. We're just telling you straight up front, we're immediately severing it. And then, they wonder why their Paizo became their Pathfinder became their major competitor, because all 3rd edition people were sitting there like, what? What are we supposed to do with our game? If we're not going to get any support for it. And so then Pathfinder happened, and that became a problem for them. But 2 years, and then because 4th edition did not take off as they had wanted it to, it brought a lot of new people into the hobby, but it did it at the expense of basically getting rid of all the old core player base of the hobby, who didn't transition from like 3rd edition to 4th edition at that point. And they all went and played Pathfinder instead, and made Pathfinder very popular. And also the games were so different at that point. Like 4th edition and Pathfinder are, despite both being pretty crunchy, pretty combat heavy games, play very, very differently. They're very different games. So, people who didn't want one flavor, obviously there was this other flavor. It was there, that was very familiar, there was a whole bunch of stuff for it, there was a big community for it that they could jump into, whereas there wasn't a big community for 4th edition because it was all basically new people who moved into that. Not a lot of old players moved forward with 4th edition. So, but it came out in 2008. 2010, the Essentials line came out. 2 years after that, open playtesting begins for D&D 5e or D&D 2014. So it's 2 years, 2 years, 2 years. Okay. That tells us that, and by the way, the public playtest comes out means that they had already pretty much ironed out most of the rules that they wanted to for the system, and they were to the part where we need to get figure out how people want to play this game. So that gives us an idea. It's like, okay, well, if 2024 came out, so big run, right? 2014 5e, 2024 rules update. Do we assume that 2026, like I said, we're going to have some sort of announcement for that 6th edition, that we're going to see some sort of play testing for that? Maybe. D&D's been 5e in 2024 has been way more successful than 4th edition ever was, though. So they may try to hold on to it for another year or two. Maybe. We'll have to see. That's going to be a money decision. That's going to be something that happens within Hasbro. That's a money decision, not a design decision. They're going to see that stuff's going down, and they're going to be like, well, what can we do? And at some point, they're going to be like, well, things get so bad that we're going to make a new edition of D&D. Despite, D&D 1's supposed to be the one and only edition of D&D, and there will never be another edition of D&D. Sure. Gotcha. That's definitely how that will work. So yeah, I would expect that we're going to get some sort of announcement for it in 2026. Of some kind. We're going to get something, whether it's going to be an official announcement or somebody's going to spill some beans about stuff. Will we get a playtest document? Probably. Honestly, probably not. We're probably not going to get that till 2027, maybe. Unless they start doing really bad. But now that D&D has branched out more as that brand, that means that there's not as much onus on the game having to sell itself. So they might just let it hang for a little bit, because paying designers, obviously really difficult. But you've got a new game designer in who's leading stuff at the game. You've just basically gutted your department in the past 2 years, so that means that when you're ready to ramp up, you hire new people, have a lot new blood in, which makes me think that 6th edition will probably look quite different than 5e. We had 5e, and then 2024, like, rules adjustments that's almost the same game, not quite the same game. Enough that I find it frustrating. We've had this frustrating. I find it frustrating running it, because just last night when I was running, it was like we had, I think, 3 different things that we were like, oh, this is how this works, and it was like, no, actually, there's like a small piece of this that changed in the 2024 update. And that's what I can say about the 2024 update, is that there are an alarming amount of just minor changes to stuff, like spells. Like, oh, the command spell, it was like, oh, well, I know in the new command spell that you can't do any one word, you have to pick from the prompts. What I didn't know about the command update was that now you don't have to share a language with the creature. The command works on all creatures now. And I'm like, but that's a weird change. Why would you change that? It's a word. There's so many spells that are like, no, they obviously have to speak a language you understand, so that way you can tell them the thing. That's how the spell works. It's like a hold person. It's clearly made for creatures that speak. What it's supposed to be for. So a lot of those little changes, like I said, I think we had 3 of them that we ended up looking up. In that one, we had the oil flask, which had a change to it. And something else. I can't remember something else. No, it wasn't Hunter's Mark. Anyways, getting off topic. Same sort of thing, though, is that the 2024 update is, I find it frustrating because it's a big change in a lot of little ways. Not a lot of big swings, but tons of little changes. That makes it frustrating to run, because it feels like I'm always having to look up rules now. Rules that I thought I knew, but now have been tweaked a little bit, and now because 5e and 2024 are supposed to play together, and when you're making a character and you're running things, you're like, okay, which ones do I choose? Because now I feel like I have to make a mishmash where I'm having to choose between 2 almost exact same systems as to which ones I want to use, because there's things that be like, well, I want to use the 2014 Legacy Edition of, like, in our campaign that I'm running right now, exhaustion, because I think the exhaustion rules are a lot more fun. Like, they do stuff rather than the 2024 results, which are like, hey, you just now have those floating modifiers, a thing that this entire system's not supposed to do. We added that back in. Cool. Doesn't seem like that's one of the things that's like a hallmark of the design. It's like, oh, design stuff's weird now. Like, you guys are doing stuff that's not supposed to be in the system. Like this, like the advantage disadvantage mechanic is specifically here, so we're not doing the floating modifier thing. And now you're adding the floating modifier thing back in, which is going to be hard for people to track because they're not used to it. It also just isn't interesting. Where you can go like, oh, I've got 5 levels of exhaustion, it's fine. I don't care about having -5 to my rolls. Whatever. Whereas the 2014 was like, oh, as you get tired, things get worse. You're like, oh, you get disadvantage on checks. Oh, you get disadvantage on your attacks and saves. Oh, you move at half speed. Oh, your max HP is halved. Also, those things felt more thematic, like, oh, I really am truly getting tired, rather than just like, oh, -1? Eh, whatever. We can keep going. That makes the first level of exhaustion way, way different. And way, really takes the teeth out of it. Really makes it a whole lot of nothing. Alright. But that's enough. I don't want to whine too much about D&D. I feel like I whined on about it when we talked about it for like 40 minutes. We're good. We're good on that. If you want to watch more D&D news, there's a buttload of other channels you can watch that are way more well informed than me. But it was interesting. I just brought it up because the 2026 release schedule is like, there's nothing on this thing. I understand that there were publishing delays in late 2025, but if you can't even tell me the year and the next book's coming out, if it's not coming out in the next year for certain, that's not super great. And again, that long tail release schedule is what makes me think, oh, there's probably going to be an announcement sometime in the future about something's happening. It's either that or they're really, really going to ride their coattails on this and really kind of focus on the D&D Warlock game, other video games, other licensing things. Because they want D&D to have that Pokemon brand status, the thing where it's more profitable to actually not put out new Pokemon games than it is, like, the Pokemon games don't, like, they make money, but they don't make, like, Pokemon money. Like, Pokemon money happens for everything else around Pokemon, not because of the games. So I think that's where they want to move D&D. We'll see how that goes in the next year. They had success with Baldur's Gate, but it is you got a slam dunk team developer to make a thing which this is really kind of like their third time making that game. Like we've played Divinity Original Sins. We just did that with a lack of D&D over it, which is not complaining. Great game. Thoroughly enjoy it. Thoroughly enjoy it. And the Forgotten Realms thing doesn't do a lot for me. I like using the D&D mechanic stuff, but as far as like the Faerun, I could take it or leave it, honestly. I'm not a huge Forgotten Realms guy. But it's fun. Like, I enjoyed it and I loved having the D&D mechanics because it's already jumping into a system which I know very well to play with. Even though it's it's different, but it's close enough and fun. And I like turn-based RPGs, so it very much kind of like ticks all the boxes for me. But it is, again, you got a developer who is already well known at making this style of game and is basically making the third iteration of the same game. Original Sin 2, Baldur's Gate 3. And now I think they're going to make it the fourth, or technically a third Divinity Original Sin, right? I believe so. But, you know, Larian's great. I've played plenty of Larian games. So no surprises there, but I think they think that they're going to get that again. And that speaks of somebody who doesn't know a lot about video game development. To be like, oh, well, yeah, we'll just hire another developer and they'll obviously make an amazing game. So, in a totally different genre than we did previously. It's like moving D&D to this action thing. We'll see, man. I'm not saying it won't be great. It could be perfectly great. I don't know anything about the developers, though. And if they have any success in that realm. Because what you don't want to do is you don't want to end up with like a Call of Duty situation where Call of Duty and this publisher buys a bunch of development teams who are like well received, like who have made good teams, so they buy that studio, and then they have them make Call of Duty, even though that's not the type of game that they were making previously. They weren't making a first-person shooter, and so surprise, surprise, maybe they're not so good at that. It's very interesting. It's like hiring a painter and being like, you were great at painting this house, so I would like to hire you to fix my plumbing. I mean, like, I don't understand why this didn't work out. Well, yeah, man. It's going to be really difficult for them. They don't know what they're doing. So, very interesting. I'm very interested to see how that works. Alright, I said we're going to stop talking about it, and then I talked about it more. Now we're going to actually talk about it. We're going to make a hard break. We're going to talk about some D&D vocabulary for our ABCs. I'm actually going to pull up the document, because we have an ABCs document. Let me see if I want to put it in there, because usually that's like an inspiration area. Let's see. And we did this on a stream a while ago, where we did the D&D alphabet. I showed this off a while back, but we can take a look at it. We'll see if we'll add any of these new words to it. I don't know if we will. We might add one of them to it. And this is a document. Let me actually. I haven't. Yeah. Do this. No. Oh no, it's not working. Oh god. There we go. I should probably actually title it. Title, there we go. So, if you're not familiar with this document before, if you haven't seen the video where I talk about this, the RPG alphabet is something that I do. It's like an inspiration document or like a swipe file. I have a few of these that I go to, where I just have, it's literally the alphabet, A through Z, or Z, depending on what part of the world you're in. And you kind of just go through it, and when I hear an interesting term or a piece of vocabulary I like, I just toss it in here. Let's do F. What's under F? Oh, this is a short one. Good. The Fade Ring. The hands clasping Faith Ring, if you don't know what that looks like. There are different types. The Fade Ring is the... Hold up. Yeah, here we go. There's another term for this specific one. But... No, I don't want to... Hold up, man. Here we go. So, there's... What is it? The Clodagh Ring, which is the most common one that I think we see nowadays. There is also these ones. So these are really old. They're back to like Roman times. The Fade Ring. And it's just like a ring that you have with your friends. To show that you're friends. It's like, you know, when like a friendship bracelet. That's how old this stuff is. It's essentially a friendship bracelet, but really fancy, because you make a ring and you give it to your friend and be like, we both wear them, and so that's how you know we're friends. But that's the specific one. Like, that's the most common one. But the designs that show loyalty to somebody else, or love, or marriage, like two people's bond together, is how this goes. So you could have somebody who was, like I have in my world, sometimes the people who are in charge of, like, a castle or something like that are not nobles. They're actually like a governor or a castellan or something like that. They are essentially a bureaucrat. They are a governor. And so they might have something like this Fade Ring that shows that, you know, they have fealty to the king. Basically their regency ring or whatever it is, and be like, hey, this is how you know that I'm the person who's supposed to be here, because it's their signet ring, essentially. But you can also have it from, like, friends. This is a cool thing if you want to throw in with, like, a group of bandits having, or some sort of assassin's guild or something like that, that they all have these rings that show that they're part of the brotherhood, or whatever you want to call it. Be a very interesting way to do that. Next one I have on here is fairy. Just different types of fairies. Fairies are a thing that don't get brought up very often, and they're really cool, so I want them to be more of them. And the three very common types, the most common types of fairy. Excuse me. Which is a cable, a reaction, and a water taxi. Let's see. The Lord of the Rings one is a cable fairy. Across the Brandywine. It's also the one that they use in the beginning of A Knight's Tale, right? Isn't that a cable fairy? I'm pretty sure that's a cable fairy. What it looks like. Go. I was hoping there was a little bit more anachronistic one. Here's a nice one. Oh, that's a very small one. Never mind. It's very small. I wanted a larger one. Larger, a little bit larger. The image in new tab. Let's see. There we go. Oh yeah, that's a nice one. So a cable fairy. There's a cable across the river. You basically pull it. As you pull on it, it moves the platform across. Like I said, that's the one that goes across the Brandywine at the beginning of the Lord of the Rings. That when they're running around away from the ring wraith, and they hop on. It's a cable fairy. Again, like I said, it's the one that's in the beginning of A Knight's Tale 2. It's just for a saint. It's really interesting they went out and put it on a fairy. That seemed like a very specific shot to have done. It's really cool. But I was like, oh, that's very interesting. Like that fairy doesn't come up. It's not important. They never show them on it again. So it was very interesting to have that in the beginning of nice artistically to show separation from crossing the threshold as far as like a hero's journey kind of thing. That's a cable fairy. The important thing about cable fairies is that obviously there's a cable. It's either going to be a rope or a chain or something like that across the river, which means can't really take boats and barges up past it because there's a big thing across it. So cable fairies are a very specific usage. Can't be a place where you need a lot of boats to go by because it'll be in the way all the time. There's the reaction fairy, which is like a swing. I was gonna see if there's a good one. There's not really a super great illustration of it that I can see, like how it kind of works. Essentially, you drive a cable into an island or something that's in the middle of the river, and you use the draft of the river current to push you across, and it kind of swings back and forth like a pendulum. It allows you to push yourself back across from one side to the other. That's how the reaction fairy works. A little bit different, but it does mean that there's always going to be one side of the river that boats can cross on, cable's not on. And then the last type is water taxi, which is just a boat you get in that takes you across. That's what we generally think of when we think about ferries, at least in the US. If you think about like the Staten Island ferry or something like that, like it's just a boat that you can drive people and cars onto, and then it goes across, unloads everybody, then boats on back. It's just a boat set up to do that. And bring that. And then fireboats is a technique, if you're not familiar with fireboats, even though this is a not super medieval thing. This is more of a like 17th, 18th century thing. Before basically Ironside ships, when ships are still like big wooden ships. And what you would do is you would take like a bunch of launches or like rowboats, smaller boats, things of that nature, and you'd fill them with a whole bunch of fire combustible stuff, and you'd set them on fire, and you'd push them. You basically push them at bigger ships to light those ships on fire. That's what fireboats are. So super dangerous. Both like performing it, like, because you're basically setting a fire usually next to your own ship, and then trying to push it at another ship, because obviously people can't steer a burning boat. It's on fire. And then you try to push it at another ship and try to light that ship on fire. It's very common. It's big use for it would be like like a port that's being sieged or something like that, where you've got a line of ships out there defending the harbor, making sure that nobody gets in or out. Fireboats would be something you might use against ships that were trying to do that. That you could maybe try to launch from within the port itself and push them out to hit those ships and hopefully light one or two of those ships on fire. They move or they sink, and then there's a way to punch through the line of ships that are closing off the port and you can get out. This is just an explanation of how this is. So I have a document where I do a whole bunch of these. But today we wanted to talk about vocab. We'll see if any of my vocab. I've got 3 words I wanted to talk about. They're just kind of interesting. One of these I was already very familiar with. One which I think we're all probably going to be pretty familiar with. And then one I was not familiar with at all. I don't think I've ever heard in my life, which is very surprising. Read quite a bit, so especially like old wordsy kind of stuff is stuff that I like. So it's a little surprising that I never heard this, or at least hadn't recalled ever hearing it before. So in no particular order, let's start with the easiest one. So the easiest one, or the one that I think is most common, it's going to be, I know it, you know it, and that's Yule or Yuletide. That's Y-U-L-E, Yule or Yuletide. Is this worth throwing in there? Not really. Because all Yule or Yuletide is that it's just basically anything that's related to ancient pagan midwinter festivals, specifically Germanic. And it's about 2 weeks of celebration starting on the winter solstice, which is what, like the 22nd this year or something like that? It's coming up. Right? When is the winter solstice? I've been sidetracked, but now I want to know. For us in North America, it's the 21st. So, you know, coming up, as in tomorrow, which will be the beginning of Yule, which is why I put it on the list. Like, it's the right time of year to be looking at this. It is tomorrow. Tomorrow is the winter solstice, so the longest night of the year, meaning the Yuletide. The midwinter festival focuses on the rebirth of the season cycle. That's the longest night of the year, so it's going to be, the nights are starting to get shorter afterwards. It's the beginning of the new year, if you look at it that way, for a lot of pagan kind of stuff. And it's around burning logs and hearths and fireplace to stave off the evil spirits and beckon good fortune on the longest night of the year and the longest nights of the year, kind of during this period of time. So that's where we see like the Yule log comes from. The same sort of traditions is why we have things like garlands, and why we even put trees inside too. Like all that stuff's very Germanic in origin. All of that sort of pagan stuff that has moved, that Christmas co-opted as Christianity kind of spread around Western Europe. So yeah, Yule or Yuletide, so it's an easy one to throw in there if you're doing something around this time as far as D&D. You can throw in some sort of Yule festival or focus on that, or if you want to learn more about the festival and rebirth and other things they kind of did during that, that's very easy to look up. Let's go ahead. I'm just going to go ahead and go. Ancient Germanic ritual, yeah, it's coming up. Intertwined with Christmas. Yule log, Yule goat, the feasting and themes of light, fire, and new beginnings. Yeah, lighting candles, that's where candles on trees comes from as well, which is very dangerous. Don't put candles on trees. Very dangerous, even for that time. It's like, that's a weird thing. Also very expensive thing to do. Yule log, lots of feasting, divination, making charms for prosperity and protection. So you feel like you can feel that Yule is very similar as this mix of Christmas and then maybe what we look at for something that's a little bit closer to like Eastern New Year kind of revelry, where you're the celebrations where people give out charms and maybe people give each other money, these wishes for prosperity in the coming year, thankfulness for the year that has come to a conclusion and we're still around, basically. The Yule goat, a straw goat symbol, possibly linked to the god Thor, popular in Scandinavian. Yule goat I'm not super familiar with, but that's fun. I wonder if they burn him in effigy or not. Probably not. Maybe at the end. Actually, maybe at the start, now that I think about it. But yeah, so if you want to dive into that, so in the current campaign I'm running in the current world that is my homebrew world, like one of the things that I dislike about D&D as a standard is that there's just not a lot of religion stuff in it. And when you go back and you look at like historical stuff in the church, and religion is so influential and so powerful and such a big part of everybody's lives at that time. And the way that I look at it is we look at a post-enlightenment society where we look at a lot of science, and that is we have replaced basically religious stuff with a lot of science stuff. So when we think about, oh, new things are coming out, or new news as far as science is concerned, or that stuff of interest of us, I think about how often that comes up in our day-to-day lives, and I think about that, like technology advancing, things of that nature, and be like, oh, well, that would just be like church stuff. That would be how people viewed religion. So it's very important, like a very daily thing. So in my world, then there's a big influence on the gods, and we have a cleric in the party, and they'd just be like, hey, and I told them as they were playing the cleric, it's like, I will lean into the religion part as much as you want to do with it, because there are some people who want to play like a cleric, and they really just want to play a wizard with a different set of spells, and that's totally fine. 100% agree with it. I've for sure done that. And been like, oh, if the religion's not important in the setting, which usually it's not, it's just like, oh, I'm just a different flavor of wizard, essentially, who just gets to wear armor and swing a mace around. Just a slightly different flavor of caster. But in this one, it's like the religion's very important because it's such a day-to-day thing, and in a world in which magic is real, especially divine magic, it's be like, oh, well, like the gods are real, and people know that. And so it's a very important part. So there are lots of rituals and little rites and stuff that people do. So I really love this stuff, like looking at stuff like the Yule goat, and that's definitely looking at festivals and things like that, and being like, oh, what can I bring in? What would people do when you're just walking around town? What are some interesting things you see? Like, you see people in my world leaving out like saucers of milk and stuff like that, and that's for if they're in like a remote village or something like that, or they leave pieces of meat and stuff like that on the outskirts of their settlement, and that's supposed to be a divine prayer to God that is the cat, which protects you against beasts and monstrosities and the deep dark parts of the world and all its nasty creepy crawlies. And so you give out these offerings to the cat, and it's like, well, those would probably appease the monsters that come around, because they get that nice milk or flesh or whatever, and they don't attack the town instead. So that kind of stuff, make it very, very clear. So I put a lot of that stuff in my game. So if you're interested in doing that sort of stuff, looking up stuff about Yule is a really great start. Do I want to add Yule to my D&D vocab dictionary? I don't think so. Yule's pretty straightforward. If anything, I would probably put some of the other take and stuff in there. Like, I think Samhain might be in there. Now that I think about it, I think Samhain is in there. Yeah, we're done. I closed the tab. What an idiot. Absolute idiot. I don't know what I did with it. Let me pull it back up again. There we go. Like I said, I think Samhain's already in here. No, it's not. Alright. I still don't think I'm gonna put it in there. Yule's not difficult for me to remember. I don't think it is for most people because it's so omnipresent as far as like Western culture is considered. So don't need to put that in. But yeah, that's coming up for us, as in it's tomorrow for us in North America. For our friends in Southern Hemisphere, it's gonna be your summer solstice. So enjoy your midsummer. So yeah. So that was one that's very common. I think we're all know. Now this next one is one that I was not familiar with at all, and that is Thews. Thews. And essentially Thews is just strength or vitality in like a soft tissue, like muscular sense. So it's similar to words like you would use like mighty or powerful or brawny or sinewy it's that kind of word. I just never heard it. It's generally used in the plural, so Thews with an S on the end, Thews, and it's often used in a place where you would say like muscles or sinew or something like that. Like, let me think of a way that. Like you could see, the shirt did not, or the tunic did not hide the thews beneath. Having like, oh, it didn't hide the muscles beneath, kind of aspect. It's a very strange word. It's not a word that I was familiar with, so I looked at it and went, I have no clue what this is. I never looked it up before, and so I was like, oh, that's interesting. I found it interesting because I believe this is the one that I actually pulled out from my Pathfinder Game Mastery book, where it has just a page that's just like, hey, here's some words for DMs to know for as far as vocabulary. I believe Thews was the one that I pulled from that. And looked at it and went, okay, yeah. I'm not sure how often I'd use it, but it was interesting, and it's definitely the one I did not know was Thews. So, do I want to add it to my RPG vocabulary? I don't think so, because I don't think it's going to bounce off for me in any ways. Like I said, that RPG alphabet, this document. The focus of this document is primarily things that are going to give me like inspiration jump off points. It's a little swipe file for me to think about things where I can just be like, oh, what's an interesting thing that I want to maybe build an encounter or an adventure around, and be like, oh, semaphore. That would be an interesting thing for me to build something around. There we go. Get a little bit larger for you guys. Which is a visual communication or signaling. Usually you'll see flag semaphore, which are the guys that hold the flags. Like that, like a toulouse, which is big. I'm not going to go into describing a toulouse. I should not have brought that up. It is basically a communal apartment, a fortified apartment, essentially. Block is essentially what it is. You can look it up, TULOU. It's a thing in a very specific part of China where they show up, and it protects them from like bandits and stuff. That's used to be what they were for. A very old kind of construction. It's like a 3-story rounded or square, like apartment block with a courtyard in the middle that usually has like some sort of shrine or a well or something in them. Usually a well, I think, in the middle of it. Vox Populi, the voice of the people. Good stuff down here, like washerwoman. Maybe I want to build something about a washerwoman. And I'm like, oh, that's not a thing it's a very common thing, but it's not a thing that comes up very often. I'm like, oh, I'll throw something in there. Or whispering gallery, similar. Whispering gallery is a way that you do architecture that allows you, if you stand in the right place, you can hear somebody having a very quiet conversation in a totally different part of like a larger room. Because the way that you angle the walls essentially to make the sound travel. And so the whispering gallery is like you can hear people having a hushed conversation like 20 plus feet away. And it sounds like they're talking to you. So it would be a fun one to build something around, like if I wanted to build like a social encounter around it or something like that. So again, so that's what this is primarily for. So I'm not sure that Thews would make it in just because I don't see that as being a jumping off point for me. So probably not going to add anything there as far as that's concerned. And our last one, our last one might actually already be in here. It is not. Last one I will probably add because I think it's a little bit more of an evocative term. And that is Verdigris. It's Verdigris, Verdigris. Or Verdigris, depending on your pronunciation. People say it both ways. I say Verdigris. A lot of people say Verdigris. So what is Verdigris? So Verdigris is that bright blue-green patina that's caused by ambient oxidation on copper and brass surfaces. Which is a very fancy way to say, like, hey, have you ever looked at the Statue of Liberty? We know that the Statue of Liberty is made out of copper. You ever notice how it's blue-green? That's Verdigris. That's the color. That's the thing. That's the patina. Patina is just like the covering that shows up on it. Verdigris is very similar to rust, like it happens for the same reason, the sort of ambient oxidation. But unlike rust, rust is destructive to the iron that it shows up on. only shows up on iron. It's very destructive to the iron it shows up on. Verdigris is actually becomes more of a protective layer on top of it, so it actually protects the stuff, the metal underneath it, and doesn't actually destroy it through oxidation like rust does to iron. So it's very interesting, and this is definitely the one that I look at. It's you'll see it if you look at stuff like the Statue of Liberty or older copper or brass things, statues, bells, antique fixtures or fasteners like buttons, coins, etc. You probably have seen a penny maybe in your life that has that on it, same sort of thing, or other sort of copper currency that has that on it. And that one I think I will go ahead and add. So I am going to go ahead and add Verdigris in here. I like it because it's just such an evocative word. It's a fun word to say for me. I really enjoy saying it. Verdigris. I don't need to define it because I know what Verdigris. I've always known what Verdigris is, or have known it for a very long time. But I don't need to describe it for myself. I remember. So yeah, I'm going to add it in there because Verdigris is a great thing to add. Like if you want to show something as being old, it's a good DM word to be like, oh, you walk in here and you look at, there's an ancient writing desk here, and you see that there is a verdigris inkwell here. So an inkwell that was clearly made out of like copper or brass, and it's got this blue-green patina on it. And so you can drop that and be like, oh, this thing has been here a while, because that's not an overnight thing that happens. It takes time for that to happen. And that immediately signals to your players to be like, oh, this is an older thing. And it's been sitting around here and nobody's taking care of it, and that's why there's this patina on it. And in the same way, like a tarnished silver kind of does that as well. Tarnish is a good word. I'm going to throw that in there. Rust, tarnish, verdigris, things that show, especially on metal, you can evocatively in a very visual way describe aging. Tapping the same way you can do wood that way. If you could be like, the wood is smooth from use, like you can't feel wood grain on it. It's so smooth and worn down because of use. It's had enough friction and sanding through use that it is perfectly smooth now. You can do that. Stone does the same thing. I feel like the stone is very, very smooth and soft. So any sort of like chipping or hard surface on the top has been weathered away. You can do that for that as well. And that works for bricks as well. So you can use these sort of very easily like visually evocative ways to be like, this is how I tell you that something is older, and shows it off. Wood, you can just go straight to the rotted part if it's, especially dry rot, and be like, yeah, this thing is pretty rotted through. I'll do that with doors and be like, yeah, you guys go to inspect the door, and if they don't realize that it's basically rotted through, they'll like grab the handle to open it or something like that, and it's like, yep, the knob just comes right out of the door, and it's perfectly, it's dry rotted through, and you can just basically push your way through this door without any issue. Even though it could be locked, it could be like, and it's clearly locked, but you can actually just push your arm through this wall, through this door, and just unlock it from the other side, or just basically grab the door and rip it off its hinges very easily. No strength check required. In our game last night, we actually had our low-level fighter actually make a DC 30 strength check, which was amazing, super great. I imagined, I was like, oh, well, it'll probably take all of them to lift it, so I was like, yeah, DC 30, so that way they could stack all their stuff together, and then they'll probably be able to do it. Assuming that they'll roll about a 10 for each of them, trying to lift it. And then it was like, nope, this one character's gonna do it. All right. It's like, you watch a fighter do an amazing feat of strength. Picking up basically like a 500-pound statue and moving it. Definitely did not lift with his back, lifted with his legs. Yeah, so Verdigris was really great. I think that those, I want to do a few more of these in the future. I only prepped 3 of them for today, but in the future I do want to look at a few more of these kind of going forward, and try to do a little bit more of this vocab because they're real fun. I'm trying to think of some situations where we do it. So Verdigris is a really easy one to use and really fun one to put in there. I like adding it for like good descriptor if you want to throw out like a custom magic item or something like that. You can be like the Verdigris rod. Feel like it is this magical, you know, it's a magical rod that is covered in this patina of bluish green, and maybe it does acid damage, or maybe it does you know, whatever you can decide to do it that makes it feel appropriately. Maybe it does oxidation, which is as close to acid damage as we're probably gonna get. It would be also fun if it was a rod that did like petrification, something like that, or it was like a wand of flesh to stone or something. You have very specific stone shape or very specific thematic spells like that that you could add to it. But yeah, that's our vocab for our ABCs. We talked about our news, we talked about our ABCs, some new stuff. This last one we're going to talk about is this 1d10 dice drop battlefield terrain system. And I'm going to... Yeah, I'll pull this up and we'll take a look at it. There's not much to look at. I'm probably going to pull up another document, because this one is one that really, I think, is better used by kind of showing some example. How do I want to do this example? Well, let me talk about it. So what is it? All right, so for me, it's a nice way to create like a quick and dirty battle map with dice drops. So this is something you can do at the table. Because if you're like me, and you, as a dungeon master, you've gotten to that situation where you're like, all right, I throw down the map and I need to draw something for this. I hadn't really planned. I didn't really have a strong idea. I didn't pre-make a map for this, which is very common, right? If you get into a combat that's not right at the beginning or right at the end that you know you're trying to get to in a session, sometimes combat just happens, or you just need to know where people are in a very visual sense, because like a trap's very specific style of trap or puzzles going off. You're like, but I need to create a room, and maybe you have the same issue that I have. I think it's a really common issue where you're like, generally we'll just like draw some stuff out, but essentially that battle map ends up just being basically a featureless white plane that we've basically been like, and there's a tree, or here's where the path is, even though there's no difference whether you're on the path or not. And we all have those sorts of situations, and I think I did that a lot. So I was like, I want a way to be able to do this a little bit better, a little bit faster, and take sort of that where I have to sit down and really kind of think about it and be like, what do I want to put in here? What makes sense? So instead of making it very easy for myself with this sort of dice drop battlefield system, and it's even thing, so I wanted to also be something that the players can do and let the players do a little bit of that heavy lifting as well. So for what I call kind of like your standard size battle map, basically let each player that's on it roll a d10 onto the battle map. It's dice drop. If you're not familiar with a dice drop table, do I have a dice drop table? Like, you know what? I'll just pull it up. So if you're not familiar with dice drop table, let's take a look at one. And let me open up this, and we'll show this off. This is Kelvin Green's loot table extended. So it is a loot table that you roll on as a dice drop. So a dice drop, rather than a usual table, when you roll on a table, you roll your die, you look at the number, and be like, okay, that's list number 6 because I rolled a 6 on my d10 or whatever. In this one, it's actually about where physically the dice lands on it. So you basically lay out a sheet and then roll a die on it, and wherever the die lands, that tells you which one of these things it is, which one of these pieces of treasure it is, and then usually you have a part where it talks about what you do with the actual numeral that's on the die, and usually that's like the valuation of something or how many of those things are there, etc. So like if I was rolling a, let's say 1d6 per hit die plus 1d10. So this is a very old school thing. Let's say we were fighting, I don't know, they were fighting some Salomon last night, and I think the Salomon have 4 hit dice apiece. So I'd roll my 1d6 per hit die. Oh, so I rolled. Okay, so what does the number do then? This might have not been a great example. Usually it's then the number is that value or number of whatever it is. So let's say if I had rolled on like the weapons guy up here, this dagger looking thing, been like, oh, well, you find 3 daggers that are useful on this thing. Or over here you have this that looks like a bottle, we're going to assume, of wine and some cheese. Be like, okay, you find 7 days worth of rations. That sort of way. But that's how it does. So you would roll the die physically on here, and wherever it lands is also important, not just the base of it. It's a slightly different way to do it. So this is essentially what it looks like. I think that's all in my notes, right? Oh yeah, so it's basically, I have it because it's helpful to quickly add cover or obscurement, difficult or impassable terrain, elevation changes, and hazardous terrain to kind of spice things up very quickly. And this is basically what the table looks like. So it's just a D10. If they roll a 1, it's half cover. If they roll a 2, it's 3/4 cover is in that area. 3, it's something that gives total cover in that area. 4, it provides something that provides light obscurement, some sort of like foliage or something like that. 5, something that provides heavy obscurement, so you really can't see through it at all. So that might be something like a clothesline. A clothesline is heavy obscurement because you can't see through the like big bed sheets that are on the clothesline, even though it doesn't stop anything from going through it. Difficult terrain, we know what difficult terrain is. Half speed, impassable terrain, something on the battlefield you can't get past. It's in the way. Some sort of minor elevation change. That's like I'd say anything that's basically within a movement. So 30 feet, assuming somebody doesn't have climbing, is 15 feet. So maybe 20 feet up or down. Anywhere 10, 15, 5, 10, 15, 20 feet up or down somewhere. And then major elevation will be anything kind of beyond that. And then hazardous terrain is something that's like, hey, if you go through this, there's going to be some sort of problem. There's an area that's on fire, or there's a bubbling tar pit, or quicksand, or something. Some sort of hazard is there, or obstacle. That if you try to go through there, there's going to be some sort of check. If you fail the check, something not great's going to happen to you. But it's also a thing that you can use against enemies too. Tell you what, I've got. I shared my battle map with some friends yesterday, so I can actually show you what I rolled. I actually rolled this up as I was making it. I did this technique where I did what I considered a standard size battlefield. And so I rolled 40, 10, because I was doing it before the session, because we were going to start with this combat, so I wanted just to show it off. So let me jump back, and then I'll pull this up, because we're going to need to pull up the program anyway, so I'm going to pull this, and I'll show you actually the map that I made for our session yesterday. Our fight with the carrion crawler. With my very, very amazing art skills. Okay, perfect. Go ahead and get rid of that. Go open up Discord for it. Perfect. And I will change this. Oh, there we go. This was the battle map that I made. So I rolled 4 times on it. And what I got is that there was going to be some difficult terrain. So up on the left, I put that there was this place where our hermit cuts his firewood. We knew that there was going to be a place that was going to give you cover. So I added in the rack, the tanning rack, as well as the smokehouse that's here. Be that, oh, here's some places where you can get some cover. Look behind that. I knew that there was going to be some impassable terrain, so I decided to make there is a hole that descends through the bottom of this cliffside down to the water below. So I dropped that in there. And like, oh, well, I know there was a landslide and there's a bunch of rocks here, so I'll use that from the description I knew of the room, of the scene or the area, and I drop that in and be like, okay, this is impassable terrain, so they can't get through this because there's just too many different sized rocks to be able to cleanly move through it. I was like, can you get through it? Normally, if you weren't in combat, can you get through this? Yes, but you have to like pick your way pretty carefully through it because there's a bunch of different sized rocks that you have to kind of clamber over. So it's not something you can quickly do like through combat very gracefully. And then we had this nice little drop. So I knew that there was going to be an elevation change, a minor one, so I was like, okay, there's 15 feet down, and then there's this shelf. It was always going to be on the cliffside, so there's always this big cliffside on the right. There's like, hey, if you get knocked off this cliff, or you knock the baddies off this cliff, they will drop 50 feet. And they will eventually be out of the combat arena at that point, if they're not immediately dead from 5d6 falling damage. Because remember, we're super low level. This 5d6 falling damage will probably kill a PC. And if they're hurt, it may kill a PC. So death is kind of always on the table. But this was an encounter with the carrion crawler. The carrion crawler, they had found out, had made its way into the smokehouse and was chomping on some cured goat. Was hanging up. And it kind of burst out and did a little attack, did a little fight. They ran around a little bit. The terrain didn't add a ton. They did discuss about trying to push it off the shelf, but it never ended up super close to the edge, so they never really ended up doing that because it kind of started off here and then ended up moving to where the PCs were and was down over here. It spent most of the fight kind of in this area because that's where the PCs were. So we did have some people kind of run behind here. We had some people try to dance around and get back behind here to get some cover, so that worked out well. Ended up pushing the carrion crawler away with that command that I said we had to look up, so it had it flee, so it fled immediately away from the cleric back towards this back corner, where it ended up grabbing the artificer and getting a good bite off on him, and then tried to crawl up this ledge because they have spider climb. Tried to crawl up this cliff out with his unconscious body. But they were able to stop that and it fell down and it is dead. But yeah, so that's how it worked with the dice drop. So I wanted to do one of these kind of live with that. And this would be what I would consider like a general sized encounter area. It's not too big, it's pretty small, like you can shoot across it for the most part. But it is not even this whole flip map folded out. It's 2/3 of it. So it is actually a little bit bigger. But I did want to jump in and I think we'll do an example of this. I need to do just a little bit of setup and then I'll set up, I think I can set a grid on here, maybe, right? I can set a grid on here. I thought I could. Oh, it's the pixel grid. Okay, that's fine. We can set this up and we can use the rulers on it and that will work. Nope, doesn't work like that. Alright, we'll figure it out here in a second. I'm going to take a quick break, do a little bio break, get myself a little bit more coffee. We'll jump in and I'll show you, we'll just build one of these kind of live really quickly. Actually, I might end up doing this in our mapping program because instead of a hex map, we can make a grid map, which might be a little bit easier way to do this. Because I can't roll virtual dice on here, on this map. So maybe we'll do that instead because I'm not going to pull up VTT for just that. So we'll do that. I'm going to take a quick break, get some more coffee. We'll finish this out. Hang in there. We'll be right back. Okay, doke. Let me get this set up. Oh, delicious. All right, let me pull up. Yeah, because I think more I thought about it, it was like, yeah, I think doing it in our mapping program is probably going to be the easiest way to do this. We can make a grid there, and then we can make a size. What is the size of this? 8, so 16. 20 by 16. Doesn't make things super great. Let's do. You know what? Let's keep it simple, stupid. Let's hear this. Let's make a 20 by 20. Adaptive size. I'm just gonna do a 20 by 20 grid. Hold on. We can actually grid. There we go. Here, let me put that back to. Alright, so we're just gonna make a 20 by 20 grid. Super easy. We're just doing the 20 by 20 just to make it easy as we roll. Because I can't roll physically on this battle in our jury-rigged battle map here. We'll just do it this way. And then we'll roll the dice roll. So let's say we're going to call this for, we say this will be a standard sized map. So I'll roll, assume I'm running a game for a classic 4-player adventuring party, a fighter, a cleric, a caster of some type, and a rogue or ranger or other skill-based guy that's with them. Very classic kind of setup. So there's 4 of them, so in a traditionally when I do this, you're like, alright, if there's 4 players, this is standard map size, each of you will roll a d10. So I'll get 4 d10 on here. If I go a larger size, if I'm doing like a larger set piece battle, or I want them to be a lot of space between where they're starting off or something like that, then I, as the Dungeon Master, would add basically half the PC's number again. So if they'd roll, each of them would roll 1 die, and then I would roll 2 dice. So there'd be 6 things on the board. And then if it goes down to, you know, a smaller battlefield where you can't pack in as much stuff, we'll only roll 2. So it's basically for essentially every 2 PCs, you're gonna roll a die, or you're gonna add a die or subtract a die most of the time. Or cut those dice in half, or add 2. I just did a very bad job of explaining that, I realized. So 1 for each PC. If it's larger, I'm going to add an additional die that I'll roll for every 2 PCs that are on there. So that way it's like, if I was running like a solo game, I'd probably only going to do most encounters with only going to have one type of terrain in it, because there's only so much I can do with it. So because the battlefields won't necessarily be smaller, because there's only 1 person fighting, you know, 1 or some other number of monsters on it. So it doesn't really need to be a huge battlefield. But if it was a big battlefield, I'd add another die. If it was a smaller battlefield, I would not go down to 0. I would just keep it 1. I might bump it up. I might do 2 for standard if I was doing a solo. Just so there's an option of 2 different things. Potentially. Could be 2 of the same thing, though. Well, we'll see. But for this example, we're going to roll 4 d10. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to do it 1 by 1, then we'll roll 2 20s. It'll tell us where on the grid they're going to go, and then 1 d10 for the type, since we can't roll directly on there. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to do, we'll roll for me. I rolled 2 d10, that was stupid. Alright, 2 d20, and then a d10. Alright, so 2 across, 15, I guess down. We'll do down this way. And then it's going to be number 10, which I know is hazardous terrain, correct? So I'm just going to use the paint. Look at these symbols, because I know that there's a good symbol. The symbol that I use for hazard anyways. I'm doing my normal hex mapping. 2, 20, 19, 18, 17, 16, 15. We know right there, centered right there, there's going to be some sort of hazardous terrain. That's all we need to know for right now. And we can actually just go ahead and do this. Just in case. So, hazardous terrain. Perfect. Alright, what's next? Oh, 12, 13, and 1. So something that's going to give half cover. 12. 8. 15. And we know that this is going to be some sort of cover. For cover, let's just say there's the shield. We'll use the shield for cover. And just write it in right there. So now we know there's half cover. In this area, we'll have half cover. And then I'll roll a d8 at the end, and we'll figure out which areas that our PCs and our monsters will come in from. That way we can talk about, you know, how they might use the terrain. All right, next. Ooh, natural 20 and 8, which is a minor elevation change. 20, 19, 18, 14, 13. And this is going to be an elevation change, so we'll use the waterfall. That seems like an elevation change. We know at the very edge of the map there's going to be a minor elevation change. Could be up, could be down, depends on our battlefield. We didn't say where we were setting it. You know what? We're going to make it extra hard on ourselves. And I'm going to say this is going to be some sort of urban encounter. Because I think it's really easy to come up with terrain sort of like out in the wilderness where you can just be like, and there's some bushes over there, or trees, or, you know, there's a ditch, or whatever, or there's a river. Very easy to do that sort of stuff. Sometimes a little bit more difficult to do that in an urban thing, but these sources that we're using are so neutral. They're so not non-specific, is that we can then invent this. One of the things that I like to do is be like, if the players roll this, they come up with what that is. So well, we can just talk about it. I think I was getting ahead. So let's say the player rolled half cover and be like, okay, what's giving half cover in this area? It might be like, oh, there's like a wagon that's here, like it's been stopped off on like or a cart or something like that that's on the side of this area, roadway or market area or square or wherever they're fighting. Be like, oh yeah, perfect, works great. Yeah, there's a cart. It could be crates, it could be barrels, it could be anything. It's just in the way. Could be like a pile of building supplies, like lumber or something like that, that's just laying around. And so sometimes I'll throw that back on the players and be like, okay, you rolled it, you tell me what this cover is. So that way I don't have to come up with everything all the time. So as Dungeon Master, you know, we got a lot of stuff that's going on, so sometimes it's helpful to offload those back to the players. And that way they feel like they have an better idea of like what the scene looks like, because they're actually creating parts of the scene themselves. And let's do our final one. 9, 8, 7. 7 is impassable terrain. Got 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 8. So there's a big piece of impassable terrain here. What seems good for impassable terrain? I like the star, because the star's like the symbol for statue usually. Statue seems like impassable terrain. You can't get around that. There's a big statue there. So already, very easy. Now obviously it's really slow because I'm doing it very manually, but as you just have a battle map like the photo I had down in front of you, and you got a pen in hand, you can just drop these things down. Or if you play with like terrain sets, like more of a like Warhammer style terrain kits, like you can just grab stuff and start throwing it down. And then you can kind of make up the sizing. I go back and forth about whether I want to create like a size based off of the dice drops. Maybe not. Then you have to roll like another die with it, and that's already making it a more complicated thing. The whole point of this is to be quick, simple, easy. And you just kind of, I find that it works pretty well, just like the previous one. Just kind of like make it much as it makes sense. Usually it's, you know, like the wood cutting thing. I was like, that doesn't really make sense to be like a full 3x3 square, but it does make sense to be more than 1 squares. So I was like, I could do a classic 4, and I ended up with 6 squares of it, and been like, okay, there's this, and then the wood pile next to it. And just kind of, you know, you just kind of vibe it out, feel what feels appropriate. Basically, we start drawing this out, it'll become pretty evident, self-evident about like what kind of size maybe fits there. But here are our 4 things. Perfect, love it. So our minor elevation change, we said that this was going to be an urban thing because we're going to make life harder on ourselves. Which one do we want to start with? I say let's start with the minor elevation. I like the minor elevation. So I think that this is going to be, what would a minor elevation look like in this urban setting? Let's say for ease, we're going to say that they're fighting up here. For ease, we're going to say they're fighting in a market square. They're fighting in a market square. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take our little thing here, and we're going to do, I'll knock out as many as seems like appropriate. So do we think that it goes up or down? If we wanted to do a cool like sewers thing, we could add access to a sewer here and be like, oh, there's like an open manhole area where you can like get down there, and that's pretty minor elevation change. It's probably like 10 feet down, 10, 15 feet down. And then we could be like, now there's this whole undercroft area that maybe they can explore as part of the fight if we wanted to add some verticality to our fight very easily. Like there's this top fight and then there's this bottom fight. What's gonna, you know, before we get too far into it, let's actually, I said we were gonna roll those d8s. We'll roll a d8 for our PCs and a d8 for our monsters or baddies and figure out where they're starting from. So if the baddies end up, or the good guys start from the right side, maybe one of them is starting in the sewers or next to the sewers. Like that. So let's roll for our PCs first. Alright, we rolled a 2, so that's 1, 2. So they're going to start off on the right side. Nope, wrong thing. So they're actually going to start out here. So we could say that they're coming out of here. Actually, that. So we wanted to make that minor elevation change. How large do we want to make the area down there? I think let's make it pretty good sized. Like there's some area to fight down there. If they want to, they can duck down in there. Maybe some things can come up through the sewer if I want reinforcements or something to show up in the fight. Or a third party, maybe some rats with filth fever kind of show up, something like that. Very simple, just to make things fun. It's a very fun thing to do. So if the PC feels a little too safe, and be like, oh, there's a minor inconvenience for you that shows up. Like if adding a single rat or dire rat or even rat swarm, depending on the level of your PC, is not going to make a big difference in the fight, but it is going to give, if you've got a caster that's just like popping up the ladder to shoot things, it does give them something to worry about during the fight. If everybody else is like way over here on the other side of the battle board doing their own thing. Anytime that they're feeling just a little too safe. Sewer and entrance. And I realized that I am not on I'm not on any of these. So this. And I'm gonna put it down here. So where do we want the actual entrance to the sewer area? I think it's gonna be, I'm just gonna replace. Yeah, I'll drop a little stamp on this guy. I'm gonna put it here-ish. That sounds right. Oh, you can't see that at all. We're just gonna replace it then. Yeah, because it's surrounded by everything. So that'll be the entrance. That's where their little manhole is. That way, if they want to hide down there, if they want to hide up here on this left side, when the creatures come down into the sewer, you know, they can maybe get a little sneak attack on it or hide from it or whatever. They're not immediately gonna have line of sight on them. All right, so we know that the PCs are entering from this side. That's sort of their starting area. It's over here on the right. Like I said, they could be coming out of the sewer. That would depend on what kind of combat we're making. I wanted it to be where they were coming out of the sewers, because they would have to have been in the sewers already. So they're going to start off from the right so somebody can run and jump down in there. They might be reticent to do that because they're not going to know if anything's in there or not before they get there. So maybe I have some nasties hiding in there. Maybe I don't. Somebody wants to hop down in there. We'll see how it goes. That's the sort of stuff that I can improvise very easily while playing the game. And where do our monsters start at? We'll roll another d8 so we can figure out where on the board they're coming from. 7. All right, so they're coming from full on the opposite side of the board. Didn't plan for that. They could have come in at the same area, but they are going to fully be coming in right here. Right here, right in the middle of the board. On the other side, I guess this is probably the middle of the board. They're coming in for that one. Now we have an idea of kind of where everybody's positioned at. So now sometimes that helps because that makes this figuring out what these things are going to be a little bit easier. So we rolled them. What do we want to do next? Let's do our impassable terrain. I've already got it highlighted. What is our impassable terrain in the middle? This, I think for that's just going to be this is just where the market stalls are. It's going to be a big area. We can make it kind of whatever shape we want. We've got a lot of room up here. So I'm thinking maybe kind of like a crooked T kind of formation. Maybe to break it up so it's not a direct line between them, so that our melee people are going to have to find a way to skirt around. They can't run directly at each other because of this impassable terrain. So I like that kind of pushes them into a 2-lane top or bottom fight as far as where they're going to be on the battle board. Do that. You could also, like I said, roll the d8s again if you wanted to, or roll 2 more dice and just see where they drop and be like, okay, that extends from here to here. Very easy way to do it. I've done that. That's really good if you have like rivers or something like that. You're like, okay, where is the river going to flow through this? And just roll 2 dice and be like, okay, now I know the path that makes a line between those 2 points. Let's say, yeah, so I think market stalls, there's going to be a cluster of market stalls that are so tight together that you can't really move through them. You know, that's going to be the market stalls and they're impassable terrain. So let's grab our thing and let's grab our stars because it's done. So yeah, I'm thinking kind of a T intersection. That's pretty heavy over here. So let's like this. Maybe a crooked T, so it's a little bit more of like a V shape. So yeah, we got like this line of stalls. This area of stalls. So there are other stalls around. We can say that there are other stalls around, but these stalls specifically, you can't get through. So this cubby of them is too tightly knit, too close together. Really good. And a bunch of like storage and crates and pots and barrels and stuff that you just can't get through it. Now remember, it's impassable terrain, which means that not providing any sort of cover. Like you can fully see the other people across from them. They're far enough away because that's not cover. We have an area that is cover down here. I think that's a good way. We're on the cover, so let's deal with the cover next. What seems like a good thing that would be half cover in a market area? We said like crates and barrels and stuff like that. You can give us something else that's maybe, or cart or something like that. So that carts is a very easy one. We could just do a card and make it a 4x4. I kind of like that. You know, I was thinking maybe we do something more interesting, something more creative, but I'm like, sometimes, you know, what is simple is best. But, what is it? Being succinct? No, it's, okay, never mind. I'm just gonna move over. It's something is the form of wit, or the enemy of wit. Not terseness. Whatever. Doesn't matter. I'm saying it's just keep it simple. We'll just keep it simple. No need to go in and try to reinvent the wheel. Because we've already got a cart. Alright. So cart, we'll just put a 4x4 because that seems right. We'll see. Cart. And just go. This provides half cover. And like I showed you in the map that I'd hand drawn and be like, you can literally just put the directions on there and words and be like, hey, this is what this is. This provides difficult terrain. This is half cover. And then use and just draw the stuff. That way it's a little bit prettier to look at rather than just drawing like mapping symbols on it. Make a little bit of a visual and then actually label the visual. We've got our cart, half cover. Perfect. Now we need some sort of hazardous terrain. Hazardous terrain's an interesting one. Because hazardous terrain's going to do something to us. Is it... So I was thinking that we could do like acid or tar or... I don't think it's so far off the beaten path. It's way over here that it's probably not going to be a big thing. Like, it's probably not going to be a thing that people get into. So, because that's the case, I don't actually need it to be super hazardous. So I think what I'm going to do, is I'm going to say this is like mud. Or like muddy clay. Like that's sort of, if you ever look at like old-timey like photographs or pretty much photographs of like, especially like Wild West towns and stuff like that, where they have like the dirt road in the middle. Like, man, that thing when it rains and becomes mud, it's just like thick clay mud that just hangs onto you. So I think that's what we're gonna do here. So basically, if they run through this, down here, this is a hazard. I think if they try to run through it, there's a strength check they have to make, or they're gonna get stuck in the mud. And so because it's not, or that, or they're gonna maybe get knocked prone in it. I think they'll just get stuck in it. They'll essentially have the grappled condition where their speed becomes 0 until they can break the grapple. If they try to run through this. Because it's not really, I don't really want it to do anything, but they will be just kind of stuck out in the open and not be able to do anything. Since it's on a very weird portion, right on the edge, like this stuff on the right side, I mean, they're probably not going to spend a bunch of time in here. Now, if I label it and tell them what it does, they're more likely to interact with it. So clear, concise communication helps a lot. Be like, hey, this is what this does. I'm telling you mechanically before you even get in there. Hey, this is mud. If you end up running into it, there will be a strength check. If you do the strength check in there and you pass, everything's fine. You move through it. If you don't, you fail it, you get the grapple condition. You're stuck there until you can get out of it, essentially. So, but because this is at the very edge, they're probably not going to run into it unless there's a really good reason to. There could be a reason to be like, well, we're going to run in here because maybe we're fighting a bunch of weenie enemies that don't have good strength scores, so we think that we can pull them, if I can draw them in here as the fighter, they come to attack me, they'll get stuck in the mud and they won't be able to reach me. We can kind of take care of them that way. Or get driven in there by trying to run away, and there's not a good place for them to run away. So I think for this, I'm just going to take up, I think, most of this bottom corner area. I think we're going to do like this. And like this. Because it's like I'm thinking like a road pathway kind of thing. So, do like a... Yeah. So it just kind of passes through here. We'll go ahead and add an extra one here. And so if they run through here, well, you go here. But if they can get to the other end, they can get like a... This is a good one for the casters. Like if they can figure out how to Misty Step or something like that to get into this corner, there's a lot of strength checks they're gonna make to have to try to get through this for a monster to get through this to get to them, and vice versa. If the monster has a way to Misty Step back here, even the fighters and barbarians might have a tough time getting through here to get to them in melee. But they also might try to look at maybe can we jump over it, or this is a good use of like a jump spell or something like that that will get you over these squares, back and forth. Oh, I realized that we did the wrong thing. I clicked on the wrong thing, and I'm not using the shield. Read this. Like, why does that look weird? You know what? I'm gonna change it. Just for funsies. And then we'll use a little bit more organic look. And then they can run through that, so I don't want that. And you know, maybe that's a funnel point. They can get through here, but they have to go through here. So if you can hang out up here, it's really hard to get to. Yeah, so this is a very easy way. And so we went from a very blank battle map and been like, okay, we're going to put in urban setting just to make stuff more difficult on myself, honestly. Rather than just like, if you were setting this off, same thing off in like the woods or something like that, I'd be like, oh, what's our elevation change over there? There's going to be like a hill, or there's going to be some sort of like a ravine or something would be probably end up being what I put over here. For this half cover, tree stump, falling over logs, classic ones, easy things to throw in a wilderness setting. Big rocks, sticking out of the ground. Impassable terrain, again, big rocks, really great for that. Any sort of tree or elevation. This is another thing where you can just put like there's a crevice or a ditch or something like that where it's nothing to really go in there for, but there's very easy places to like where you can jump over it or do something like that. Run down there. And a hazard, we could have done like the tar pits or razor vine or brambles or any sort of thing. There's like, hey, you can move through this, but if you do, there's a chance you're going to take some damage, or grab grass and you're going to get stuck there just like you did with this muddy clay. But it makes it very easy to make these. This is a much more interesting fight to now have, because now we can look at, okay, what are our monsters actually going to do? So our monsters, we're going to start over here. So if we have if we have people who are ranged and, you know, some casters or goblins with bows or whatever it is, they're not really great in melee with big tough fighters and barbarians and paladins and stuff like that, so they kind of want to stay away from them. They can chill out over here behind the impassable terrain, shoot arrows at people. They can try to make their way back here. They might run all the way down, flip back around in here, so they can get protection and fire from here. They'll obviously try to get to the cart for some cover. So we already know that there's 3 ways that our ranged monsters are going to try to get to, so they can fire upon this PC position very easily. They might get over here into the sewers, but probably not. They're probably not. By the time they make it all the way over to the right side of the map, that's probably going to be round 3-ish. If you have enemies coming over here that aren't just going over there to bonk people on the head, they could pop down in there, but honestly, with that in, they might. In fact, what they might do is they might escape that way. That might be where they try to run when if they fail their morale checks or something like that, they run and jump in the sewers and run off that way. Might be a fun way for them. So then you could do like a sewer chase scene if they wanted to chase after them or something like that. Or they could get some information out of these creatures or something like that. You can run a nice sewer chase thing where you're chasing goblins through the sewer. Very fun. So that would be if these monsters are more of a range type. If they're attacky types, and there's no real easy way to say it, they're probably just going to run. Start here. They're going to hook through this area. So you've got a little choke point here. So if there's a few of them, they might try to do a choke point here against, you know, fighters and paladins and stuff. Try to hold them at bay right here and protect their friendlies back here. Protect their friends that are shooting from cover. They might try to do a choke point here, or try to push just straight on through to get to the PCs. The PCs aren't trying to rush to meet them. Or they take the north route and they just wheel around here. So if you have monsters that are just moving, it's going to take them like 2 rounds to get there. So they're gonna hustle to go there. Now, lots of monsters have usually some sort of, they're tool users, they've got some sort of ranged attack. So they can, you know, basically run up here, do some sort of ranged attack, and then on their second turn, circle in and do that. But yeah, they're going to round about this north side and come that way. So that's really great if you have monsters like the Salaman that I was running last night. They have a fire spit ability where they can spit things. Technically, they're only supposed to shoot it 10 feet, but in a battle like this, I probably would let them shoot it further, because it's just a one attack thing. And so I might let them get the full, like, 30 range out of it, like they really hawk that loogie a fireball. Since they only get one of them per an encounter. Unless I was running a whole bunch of them, then I would not let them do that. It would be way too potent. But I would let them have, like, slings or something, because they use weapons. So there's no reason they wouldn't do that. And have slings or arrows or some sort of ranged weaponry, even though their stat block technically doesn't give them any. So yeah, that's how they would go on the north route. In this southern route, they probably go here. They could go down here. I don't think melee creatures are going to spend a lot of time down here. I don't think anybody's going to spend a lot of time down in this lower right corner if they're not going directly for the PCs aren't going directly for the sewers. I don't think the monsters are going to spend a lot of time down here. There's nothing for them down here. Nothing interesting to do anything with. Now we know what our monsters would do in the fight. Immediately. See this. Again, didn't really take any prep. It's just like, okay, what do the monsters do? What are they good at? How would they position themselves to effectively win the fight? So your covered guys are going to look for cover. They're going to look for ways to get to a vantage point where they can see people, but also maybe people can't get to them. So any type of the cover, impassable terrain, this hazardous terrain, trying to get behind that sort of stuff, where they can still fire on people. The melee-oriented monsters are trying to get to PCs, specifically PCs that don't want to be them near them, which are like if they can really jump down and isolate a rogue, that's really great, or grab somebody who's standing in the back who shoots arrows, or a caster. They're going to try to prioritize to get to those people who they can really rip up usually pretty good, because they usually don't have great AC or HP. The monsters are trying to win, remember? They want to kill these guys too. They're not just here to die. So that's great for them. Obviously, if you had some sort of leader-ish kind of guy who wants to stay in range for a lot of things, they're going to try to hang around as close to this middle of the combat as possible. They're going to try to stand in the middle of all their guys so they can get to anybody at any point. Especially if they have like a ranged thing, so this guy can easily give something to this dude. You can take a couple steps back and give it to this guy, or this guy, or this guy. If for some reason somebody stayed back here, they probably won't. They can get to this guy and then maybe take a couple steps up and give it to this guy if he needs to, if he's out of range. So yeah, your leadery types, controllery kind of guys are going to want to hang around here in the middle, behind wherever there's probably a front line, fix it up, brute, big brawny thing with a bunch of HP. They throw in a fight, they'd want to be here. All right, let's do PCs. See how the PCs we're going to use the same thing very similarly. We'll give them the low wizard set. All right, this time let's swap it around. Let's see what our melee guys would do first. So our melee guys, very similarly, they're going to run here. They're going to try to control that choke point. You can do that. They're going to run up here. They might mix it up with the people up here who are kind of far away from everybody else. So these people will be off, kind of having their own fight for most of it. Kind of off to the side. So a real great way to isolate creatures. They might pop down into the sewer because they're very close to it, to get some cover on stuff, do things. And if they need to run away, they could always do that too. Or if they have some other advantage as to why they would want to fight in the dark in the sewers, they could do that. I don't know why they would do that, but they could. Because that's pretty much where everybody's going to go as far as melee. So this is going to be a range thing. They go down there if they're ranged. Again, they're going to hang out probably up here if they're ranged too. You see that pretty much where they're going to go, they're going to try to use the same terrain that the monsters do. So you end up with kind of going to the same places. Unlikely that they're going to make their way all the way down here, but I said that, you know, they could maybe get down here and throw in a misty step or something that'll get them across. Or, you know, a dimension door or something like that, where they can jump across the battlefield really quickly and put themselves back there and maybe hide that way. But yeah, I mean, you see that when you put the terrain out, then naturally the monsters all NPCs will naturally kind of run into each other, depending if they're trying to make use of it. So you see that where these conflict areas are going to be here. So here we're going to have probably some guys potentially throwing spells or arrows at each other, or daggers, back and forth across maybe this impassable terrain, which, you know, very thematic. They're running in between, like one's on one side of a line of stalls, one's on the other line of the stalls. They're running back and forth, shooting at each other as they're moving around, shooting through the market stalls. Have these two that run around, wheel around the market stalls and run into each other, and this will probably be more like a single combat moment where it's like the paladin comes around the corner and the hobgoblin come around the corner at the same time and lock eyes with each other and kind of settle into duel mode over there. Which, I mean, we know the paladin's probably going to win with smites. Like that hobgoblin is pretty cooked if he's by himself. But maybe a beefier guy. Maybe that's a bugbear or something over there. Down here, you're going to have the same thing. You're going to have maybe the rogue and like that goblin shooting arrows at him. And they're ducking back and forth around this cart. As they might be like running wheel arounds or running in and out to support these two who are probably where the major amount of fighting will happen, melee style. We'll be at this choke point if they can get there. This might be a part where we're trying to hold back a whole bunch of goblins over here, or maybe this one, you know, hobgoblin or bugbear, somebody's trying to hold it and protect some casters or arrow guys, but back row guys who are back here, trying to really use that choke point really well. Because if PCs can control the choke point, all their casters can kind of stand here. They'll still probably kind of go over by the carts or maybe behind this impassable terrain if everything floods to the middle. But generally you're going to have basically these three paths. So somebody's going to run the north area. Most people are going to try to bust through this middle area. Then you might have some people that swing down here, but that's probably going to be pretty unlikely because they won't be very far from the main fighting, and they probably want to be far from the main fighting. And going around the cart's not really going to save them a lot of time. There's a guy standing in the way, maybe, because it's still going to basically take him a move to get around the cart. But this is also a point where you get somebody doing some shenanigans. They'll be like, hey, what if I try to, can I scramble over the cart or jump over the cart or something like that, and be like, oh yeah, we'll do some athletics checks, and if you do, or hey, the cart's like down on one side, can I jump up and grab the cart and pull it down on my side like seesaw style and like hit the goblin or whatever on the other side with it? Yeah, sure, why not? We'll see how that happens, and you can do a whole bunch of improvised damage to this guy or fling him off the cart if he's on top of it. So lots of fun things. Very quick way, use this dice drop, go ahead and so very easy way, so you get a handful of d10s, roll it on the board, come up with something really quickly. And then you can see very easily how the player characters and how the monsters will use that space. Should we do one more? I maybe won't do all this part, but let's do one more. I feel like one more. We got time for one more. Let's clean up our board a little bit. I guess technically I could just go clear it, but so we did that. Let's do something else this time. Do a different arrangement. You know, I'm a sucker for a good swamp or marsh. Let's do a swamp or marsh. We'll just say wetlands. The same area. Let's figure out where our guys are going to start at first. Our PCs. It's just a D8 clock. We're just going to go around 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. So they're going to start off on the south side. The monsters are going to be starting off on the southeast side. Great. Alright, so we got our PC start. It's going to be here. And our monsters are going to be coming in over here. And now we'll find out if whether something's going to be in the way or not. And the dice drop thing isn't perfect. I would probably have, if I'm letting the players roll this, I'd have them roll. Smart way to use this is have them roll for the terrain first, and then once all the terrain's down, once you figured out the terrain, then figure out where the PCs and the monsters are going to enter from. That way you can make the most interesting map. Because one of the things that you can do, which is a failed start for me, is like if I do this, or I have the PC start here and the monsters start here, and I have this entire battlefield, if I don't end up rolling anything, any sort of terrain that's kind of in between them, they're just going to run at each other and the entire fight's going to happen right here. And they're not going to use this other 75% of this battle board. So I really need something here that keeps them from getting immediately at each other. That way they'll run out and use some of the terrain. That's why it's often better to roll the features first, and then once you've rolled all the hazards and terrain and cover and all that stuff, then decide where people are starting from. It's a very different fight if they both start here, or let's say the PCs started way up here, fully across, as we saw in the last example. If you start them on the opposite sides, they gotta make their way basically through most of the terrain to figure out how to get to each other. But if they start very close, they might just end up the whole fight takes place here, and it's not very interesting because they don't use any of the terrain if all the terrain's up here. You might have somebody run if there's some cover they can get to and move. Otherwise, they're just going to sit here and pew pew and swing at each other. But let's find out what we're doing. All right, 20 and 8 and 2, which is 3/4 cover. One, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. The 3/4 cover, starting right there. Again, pretty far to move to. Gonna take a full 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Gonna take you a double move basically to even get near the cover. So if you want to blow your entire first turn of combat to get there, probably not great. If you have a caster, they'll move 6, shoot. Try to move 6 again and shoot if they can stay within range. If they're going to still be within range, if they can, have a firebolt or something like that, then they might run up here and make use of that terrain, where they can stay in range very easily. Then if they need to make a move back in to get to like 60 feet or something, they can do that. 30 feet. All right, so we got 3/4 cover. So what makes sense for 3/4 cover in a wetlands fight? Any sort of like hedge, tall marsh. So we're gonna say, no, well, we don't. That would give them more obscurement if we said reeds. We need something that's covered, so something that will stop arrows, essentially, or spells, which the reeds aren't really gonna do. That's more of a concealment thing. They're not too difficult to move through. A nice like tops of trees is a really good one. We'll say that this is like a wayward tree. We'll say wayward willow. There's a willow that's kind of like pitched at a 45-degree angle, and the willow has all the weeping basically branches that hang off of it, so it gives us a lot of cover under there. So you can see that people are in there, but then they're still really difficult to hit. I like that. I'm just gonna 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Roll D10 and 4, 5, 1. Okay. So I'm just doing that so I know where he goes. All right. Let's give us some like more. Yeah, that looks good. That'll be our cover. Tree that's kind of hanging down. Or wayward willow. I'm actually gonna change that. Actually see it on the board. So there's our wayward willow. It's going to give us 3/4 cover if they run up here. Great. Do our next one. 13 and 7 and 5 is that heavy obscurement. So this will be our tall reeds probably. 13 and 7. 5, 6, 13. All right. So we said that this was going to be heavy obscurement. What's a good one for obscurement? Let's use our question mark for heavy obscurement. How big? So we get to a question and be like, do we want it to be? It'll probably be like a mass. Do we want the mass to be big enough that there's an open part on the interior that they can maybe know or not. They might not know until they get in there, though. That's one of the difficulties when you're drawing a top-down map. Be like, they don't know that there's a thing in there, but if I don't show them that there's a space in there where they can have line of sight, they won't move into it. That's fine. Let's roll 2d8. Where to where? 1 to 1. Well, that doesn't help me. 1 to 5. I can do 1 to 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay. Let's do. No. There we go. So this will be our tall reeds. This heavy obscurement. So heavy obscurement, can't really see through it. Basically have the blinded condition while you're in there. Attackers have disadvantage to hit you. You grant advantage, which means that obscurement's weird. You're blinded, so you grant advantage to attackers, but attackers also can't see you, so they have disadvantage on the attack, which means that heavy obscurement's really weird because that actually means that they kind of cancel each other out. So it's very weird. Unless maybe it says specifically in heavy obscurement that attackers. Yeah. The way obscurement's written is very weird, because there's a way to read it to basically be like, oh, if I'm in heavy obscurement, anybody who tries to attack me has disadvantage because they can't see me. Also, I'm in obscurement, so I'm conditioned to the blinded condition, which means that I also can't see attackers and grant advantage to them. That means that hiding in obscurement, you can just heavy obscurement. Also, just there's a way to interpret that, which means that they just attack normally into obscurement, which doesn't do the thing that obscurement's supposed to do, which nullifies itself, that's why it's like it's not written super well. So I think that's the rules as written. It's certainly not supposed to be the rules as they are intended, and certainly not how anybody runs it at the situation, which is basically like, hey, if you run in here, anybody who tries to attack you in here, they're going to have disadvantage on those attacks because they don't know where you are. They're subject essentially to the blinded condition, which means that you have advantage to attack them, but also you have disadvantage because you are technically also blinded. So, but most of them are like, oh, if you move to the edge of the obscurement, we assume that you can like poke your head out and take a shot. Or you do the classic wizard thing where you're like, I step out from obscurement, shoot my spell, because you can split move and fire in D&D 5th edition 2024. I step out, shoot my spell, step back into concealment. That way I'm not subject to the effect. Then you get into weird things. You get into the cover thing that happens, which is, okay, this guy's in cover. I'm going to wait till he pops his head up, so I'm going to ready an action to shoot the guy when he sticks his head up. And you're like, okay, well, that guy will also ready an action to do the same thing to you if you're in cover. Then you have this cover standoff where nobody's actually doing the reaction, so nobody's firing at each other. This is the part of D&D that gets really weird and wonky. So you kind of have to, as a DM, be like, nope, this is what happens. They just have the cover. You have to figure out a way to get them out of cover. That way, they always have the bonus to cover. If you're in the cover, you always have the bonus to cover. And we don't do readied actions one-offs that just never go off because nobody sticks their head up because they have a reaction set for you to stick your head up. Instead, it's just like you guys just take attacks at each other unless you're going to try to drive them out of cover somehow. All right, we're going to do 4, so let's do our next one. So it does look like we're going to end up with nobody up there because I screwed up. So 1 on 2 and 8, which is our minor elevation change. We have a minor elevation change up here. So 1, 2 goes up here. Go ahead and add our elevation change. Okay. Perfect. So again, it's in this top corner. Based off of where everybody is, probably not gonna be important. So I think in this we're just gonna do like a do this as like a hillside or something up here. And so it's just like a graded, like if you ever look at a topographic map where they have like the little rings, you're like, okay, you walk up and it's like 5 feet, then it's 10 feet, then it's 15 feet up. And so this is just gonna be a hill. Nothing fancy, it's just a hill. We could also make it a giant tree depending on the kind of game you run. You want to run a little bit more magical kind of game, you could be like, oh, this is the root of like a great like Yggdrasil kind of massive tree if you wanted to do that. But I run pretty lowish fantasy games, so this shouldn't be a big old hill. Say this is the hillside. So this hill is probably really big, so it actually extends farther, way further up northwest. We're looking at it like cardinal directions, orthogonal directions technically. To the northwest, so it's probably a big hill that's rising out of the swamp. But they're having the fight on the run up to this hill, maybe. A good place would be like, oh, well, we're going to camp here tonight or something like that. That'd be a great place for it, because it's going to be dry land and swampy, wetland, marsh area. And we have one more. So, like I said, I think I have totally screwed us over by not putting the terrain first and then saying where everybody comes from. Because I think what's going to happen is the thing that we didn't want, which is these two guys are just going to have this, two sides are just going to have this fight down here, and they're not going to do anything with any of this terrain. Hey, it happens. So what I would do is then I would be like, actually, this is dumb. I'm not going to... Immediately what would happen is that if I was doing this in person, I'd start filling out the map like I did and been like, whoop, I made a mistake. I should not have done this way. And 3 and 5, which is 5, which is heavy obscurement. So I think we'll just do more reads. There's no reason to do it. We could do fog if we wanted to. We could say that there's a foggy area over there. Some sort of unnatural darkness could be over there. Or more just like foliage. You can always just do foliages over there. So 3 and 5 is going to put us pretty much 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 right here. So that's already on our hillside. So let's just roll again. So we'll keep this. No, we'll just go with whatever the new. 12 and 1. So that's going to have us something way up at the top. And it's going to give us something with light obscurement. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 8. 12 and 1. Now this is going to be some sort of obscurement up here. What were we using for obscurement before? I don't know if what were we using? Oh, the question marks. Question marks. I could have also used this guy. Maybe we'll use this guy. Light obscurement. Yeah, it's a cloud over the sun. Obscuring the sun. We did it. Alright, so yeah, there's not going to be really anything up here that's going to be of interest. Now what we can do is that we could make like a pathing thing. We'll put this up here. Here. And our light obscurement's going to be minor elevation. Down here, our light obscurement. We have those heavy reeds. That's going to be the tall obscurement. I'm just going to say that this is going to be sort of like hedge. Now, light obscurement, remember, means in 5e 2024 means that there's no disadvantage on attacks or anything like that, like there is with the weirdness that is heavy obscurement. In light obscurement, the only thing you have an advantage / disadvantage to is perception. So this is a good place to do an ambush, or to get in there. This is a great place for your rogue to be hiding out. If you got like a sniper rogue or something like that who wants that stealth, they can stealth hide in here, pop up and take attacks, and they'll get that essentially +5 to their stealth checks while they're in there against the monster's passive perception. So it's super great Light obscurement, super great for like rogues, anybody who needs to hide. Not really good for anything else because there's no disadvantage to attacks in there. Like, they know you're in there. Again, the obscurement rules are weird in 5e 2024. Like, okay, I can't see you well, but yet I have no problems to attack you. Even if I'm using missile ranged weapons or spells. That seems weird and not probably how that was intended to work. Yeah, it's a little bit weird, but that's our battle map. Now, as you can see, there ain't nothing south of the equator here. It's all northern hemisphere up here. We got nothing down here, and we put things down here. So if I was making this map and realized that I had screwed this up, I would have immediately changed this, and then I'd be like, okay, if I wanted them to start, let's say if I wanted to honor this, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to shorten the battlefield. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to shrink the battlefield. So I'm going to take this PC start area, knock this out, and we'll just use monster start area. But I'm going to adhere to the angles at which we were coming up. What we actually rolled for them entering the fight. So I'm going to have them still enter at the bottom, just not where they can immediately attack each other. So here's where we would go do this. I'm going to take my monsters. My monsters are going to start from a position of strength. They're going to start down here in this 3/4 cover. Come across their camp or something where they're camping under this wayward willow. So they immediately have cover. And we wanted our good guys, they're going to start off like here. And it helps if I use the correct thing. Our PCs are going to start off here. So there's the heavy obscurement. We'll say that our monsters were setting a fire or something like that. And well, I'm always assuming they're human. For some reason, I always assume humanoid enemies. This could be some sort of like hunting. Let's just, you know, let's just figure out what's gonna be. We're gonna do our filter. We're gonna set our native terrain. I believe there is a swamp, right? Oh, there we go. And let's say our levels, and let's just say they're 4th level characters. I want them to have a fight in here. So it's ghosts. Yeah, that's a cool ghost encounter. I love it. So you have this wayward willow that there are a bunch of wraiths under. And so they're howling through the swamp. So now it makes me feel like the swamp fights happening at night. Or in the evening. I've been playing a lot. I've been replaying The Witcher 3. And as I was doing that, I was like, yeah, wraiths in Velen. Yeah. Very, very Witcher. Wasn't intending to do that, but that's where we ended up. Finding a race in the wetlands. And so maybe there's something under this wayward willow. Maybe there's some dead guys at the camp and they're turned into wraiths. Or maybe there's a temple or some sort of rune mark that they might find if they go over there and investigate. They're like, why are these wraiths here? If I don't want it, if it's not just a random encounter. If I had a reason for them to be there, they would be there. So basically what I did is I shrunk the battlefield, and we can just do that. So we can take more off of that. There we go. So we made a smaller battlefield, which is fine. Generally, making a smaller battlefield is not a big deal. Generally easier to make the battlefield smaller rather than larger. And now we have a different kind of starting here. So they might go up on this hill. Probably unlikely. They've got this heavy obscurement the PCs can deal with, this light obscurement if we got a rogue who wants to get over there and do that stuff. The problem is that this is actually a really, really great battlefield for our wraiths. First of all, our wraiths fly, so they're not going to have any issue with any sort of like minor elevation change. Also, I believe we're going to see. I'm pretty sure they have blind sight. Yeah, they fly 60. They're fast, and they make it through the swamp. Nothing's going to stop them in the swamp. Damage resistant consistency. Senses dark. Oh, they just have dark vision. Great. Incorporeal movement, which means that they can move back and forth through this heavy cover. They don't have to move around it. You know what? This hillside's probably like a barrow mound or something like that. That's probably where these wraiths are from. They're just out here messing around in this Willow area. Take the extra eye out of Willow. Yeah. They can zip back and forth right through this tree. They can zip through these tall reeds without much of an issue. Now they don't have blind sight, surprisingly. Surprisingly, wraiths have dark vision. Seems like a very natural thing to have blind sight to me, but they have dark vision, like every monster ever. So though getting through the tall reeds shouldn't be too much of an issue for them, but it is a cool place where either one side can hide and be really, really terrifying. Like if you throw what is it, like 5 wraiths, move into here and just hang out in here and dip out to attack people when they get close, then they're much scarier. And if you have your fighters go in here where they can't see and the wraiths can't see, it's just that'd be a cool encounter. They can go up here in the light obscurement where they can hide and pop out, or chase after the rogue in here. Very easy to do. Again, the hillside, just in this example, just because where we ended up starting off, not a big thing. If I was going to swap this around and change this, maybe what I might do is I'd probably have one of the factions starting on the hillside, starting somewhere up here on the hills. Now, the thing is that the wraiths don't have any ranged attacks. This is one of the things is like I make the brain and then I'm going to look at the stat block and see what makes sense for them. They've got their life drain. They can create a specter, undead. So if I know this is the setup, here's what I might do. Like we talked about that being a barrel mount. So this creates specters. So here's what's going to happen. Is that I'd probably take our good guys and I put them up on this hillside. And I might be like, this might be the first thing. Again, this assumes that I'm planning it. I'm not making it at the table. If I'm making it at the table, this might be something that they catch. This will work even better. So they come in here. They see that these wraith-like shapes are moving around through this wayward willow, like thrumming around within it. They're gonna make some check probably to understand that it is a wraith to ID what the monster is. And they're going to be like, okay, also get perception checks, and then just whoever gets the highest perception check. It's not that whether they see it or don't, it's just who's going to notice it. Whoever gets the highest, I'm going to say up here on this hillside, they notice that there are maybe another dead adventuring party or somebody that's in here, somebody who looks like they got torn apart. And even though it says on the wraith that you can only create a specter of a humanoid, I might change that and be like, it might be cool to have like some deer or something that were up here that have died a violent death, or have been like have a deer or something, a stag up here that's been poached or hunted and maybe has been or maybe an alligator got to or something because we're in a swamp, got to it, and has been like basically half eaten very recently. And be like, well, the specters could technically turn that, or the wraiths could turn that into a specter and have to deal with a deer specter, which would be, I think, cool. That would be a cool change of pace instead of it being humanoids. And so whoever notices that as the PC be like, okay, we can't let it get over here. Maybe there's multiple dead bodies over here. We can't let them get over here because they'll create more minions. So now we've created some goals in the fight. It's not just kill all the enemies. Now they're like, okay, yeah, we gotta get the wraiths gone, but also we gotta keep them from getting up onto the barrow mound or whatever it is, and to get to these bodies, because if they get up there, they'll be able to create more specters. Target spirit rises as a specter in the space of its corpse. Spectre is under the wraith's control. The wraith can have no more than 7 specters under its control at one time, which I assume that there is a specter stat block. Our specter stat block real quick. See what that looks like. They also fly. They got some pretty decent hit points. Their armor classes crash, but that's fine. They're still going to have all the incorporeal damage resistances and immunities, which makes them very tough to deal with. And they're still going to have life drain. Life drain is really nasty because it takes their hit point max down. You don't want to fight these guys, and you definitely don't want more of them on the board. So you give them, you're just upfront with the players and be like, hey, this is what happens. You know this about this creature. It does the life drain ability. hey, if it gets over to those dead bodies or is able to knock you guys down, it will try to create specters out of you. And they also have the life drain ability. So just FYI, letting these guys get to the dead bodies is a bad thing. And here's the thing. Once we do that, once we've changed the goals for the PCs, we can change the goal for our monsters. Now, our Wraith monsters, I'd always assume we're just going to go kill the player characters. But hey, there's perfectly good dead bodies just over there. Let's just go use those instead. So these Wraiths in the beginning are not going to try to fight. They're going to try to zip into this heavy obscurement so they can't get attacked in this first round. The second round, they're going to try to run up here and try to get to these dead bodies so they can raise them as specters and be much more difficult. Now it's about the PCs stopping them from getting from point A to point B. Totally different thing. Or, at that point, they can, whoever's clocked this and been like, Wraith, they're real bad, they have life drain, I don't want to mess with that. Your cleric, probably, or wizard's going to be like, real bad, we don't want to fight these things. I know what these things are. And then look over the dead bodies and be like, ooh, they'll also make more of them. Maybe we should just run. We don't need to be in this fight if this is not a critical fight for any reason. This was like a random encounter on the road or something like that, and be like, we should just run from this. Now, if the PCs decide to run, then Wraiths, we can assume, have kind of animal intelligence. You have a predatory animal that sees something, turn tail to run from it. Its instinct is to chase that thing, is to hunt that thing. So now maybe we make this goes from a fight scene, which we set this up to be a fight scene. The first round happens. They realize that they're not going to be able to stop these guys because, first of all, they're just faster. Here we can say 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, 35, 40, 45, 50, 55, 60, 65, 70, 75, 80. Yeah, okay. So if they dash, they just get there because they have a 50-foot fly speed. Nothing's going to stop them. If they win initiative, they're just going to go straight for that. If they go straight for the bodies and the PCs immediately feel like, oh, this is about to get really worse because they're about to raise all these specters on the next turn. And there's no way we're going to kill all these Wraiths before they start raising specters on their turn, which is going to double the size of this fight. It's bad stuff for us. We don't want to be here. We got to get out of here. They're going to turn and run. They're going to turn and run. When they turn and run, these guys will probably raise the specters. They're still faster, and then make their 50-foot run back towards the PCs. At this point, you'll see, I'll narrate, oh, you guys start hoofing it. You splash into this water, running through the swamp. We're going to say at night, just a little bit more thematic, through the moon overhead and the swamp fire that's going on, the swamp lights, running through it. Torches guttering in the wind as those gravelly fingers of the trees above you stretch out. You guys start running. You see these sickly pale creatures on the hillside illuminated in the darkness of nothing else, and you see more figures raise up, and you know that they have risen to specters. You guys are running, no problem. What this is going to do, after you see them rise these specters, you see them howl as they start to descend the hill, rushing in your direction. And then we would just transition to a chase scene and be like, this is chasing. You guys don't want to get caught by these things, but you are going to run. They are fast. They're faster than you, and they don't have to worry about terrain because they fly. So it's going to be really difficult. You're probably going to end up fighting these guys. But if you want to run, you can definitely run, or at least run, and in running, look for a more advantageous battlefield for yourself. What will that look like? No idea. Maybe if they know something that's nearby, maybe they know some hallowed ground or something like that that they can run to. Anything like that. Yeah, anything that'll try to keep them. This one might be one of the things where we pull in like a folklore thing and be like, can they cross like a running water stream? That's which you could come across in like a marshy wetland area. Unlikely, because it's the kind of area it is. They could technically run across something like that if it was more of like a fen or something like that. It's built off of a river. Where you're in more of like an alluvial plain kind of situation rather than a true like a coastal kind of swamp. Or mangrove. So they could do that. And maybe they're looking just for like maybe if you have a druid or ranger, they can look for some sort of like natural place that's going to give them a guardianship against this, give them some sort of protection, some sort of like a druid circle, not a druid circle as in where the druids live, but a druid circle as in like a hinge or something like that, maybe a place of power that might be in the same way like a sacred ground can protect them from the wraiths or give them some big advantage in the fight, because 4 wraiths plus let's say I'm gonna say like 2d4 bodies, 2d3 bodies. All right, 1 2 3 1, so 4 bodies, so that's 4 specters and 4 wraiths. That will change. I was gonna put this in the encounter building thing, but that's kind of pointless because the 2024 encounter builder is not something I think works very well. So it's still gonna say that, hey, this is a super easy fight. That's probably what it's still gonna say, even though I think fighting 8 enemies is gonna be really, really tough. It's a really tough fight. So the wraiths are faster than the inspectors, so they're gonna get there first. Like, when something's, most people run 30 and these things fly 60, you cannot run away from them. They're gonna catch you. So it's really about where do you get to. So your choice is not like necessarily, we're probably not gonna get away. We gotta either hide from them, because they just have dark vision, so you figure out a way to hide from them, or you're just trying to choose your battlefield, just trying to find the place that you want to get to, put you in a position to win and have your best fit. That's why you're looking for that place of power, some sort of hallowed ground, some place you can go to that might give you some sort of boon in the fight that's coming. Me as a DM would look at something like that and be like, okay, what kind of condition can I throw on the bad guys, or what kind of boon? Maybe you guys, if you run into the sacred place, you basically get the effects of maybe like a bless spell on there, bless, maybe even resistance. I might consider that, just because it'll be a tough fight otherwise, unless I want it to be a really tough fight, and then it will be a really tough fight. But yeah, super simple. You do this 1d10 drop, so you can grab it, use it for yourself. Super easy. Helps you make really interesting combats like this one on the fly. You can make that pretty easily if we haven't planned it, or if we planned it. If I had a planned encounter like the one that I did on the whiteboard, it's like I knew what the encounter was going to be, so that allows me to set it up however I wanted to set it up. But yeah, I think that's going to be it for this session. This was fun. It was fun to sit down and kind of do some practical stuff. I want to do more of this stuff, and I know phone upgrade for Android phones, which is what I have. There's a way that you can actually use your Android phone as a webcam, so I'd like to do something where maybe I could do some hand drawing and be able to use that as a second camera to show you guys that it integrates directly with OBS, which they do now. But I'm not sure. I got to do a lot more research on how to set that up, because the way I looked at it on my phone, I was like, oh, this is not nearly as easy as some other phones. It's very easy on mine, however, not so easy on. So it's something I might want to look at doing in the future. I'd like to do it, and just so that way I can do things with hands, because I don't have like a Wacom or Wacom tablet to like draw things. So it is what it is. But hopefully this was entertaining, informative, useful for you. If that's the case and you like this content, go ahead and give it a big like, thumbs up. If you want to see more of this stuff, of course, subscribe. We also have stuff, the old blog things if you want to really dive into more meaty world building stuff. RedDragonTeam.com. I also sell some stuff over on DriveThruRPG. There's the coffee link. All that stuff's in the description if you want to throw me a phone. It's great. Otherwise, I hope you guys have a great weekend. I hope you're prepared for Yule tomorrow, at least the time of recording this. We'll make sure to get our pagan festival on and celebrate the longest night of the year. At least in the northern hemisphere, the longest day of the year if you're in the southern hemisphere. But yeah, I think that's it for me. Thanks for hanging out, guys. We'll catch you next time, alright? Bye!